Vajra unbeatable. Buddha rays shone brilliantly from monk Banshi, and his muscles swelled, becoming 12 yards tall. The 9 rings monk staff also became bigger like a huge sun behind the head of a huge Buddha. This was Vajra unbeatable technique of Buddhism, a kind of technique whose forte was the divine arts of the corporeal body. There are many kinds of techniques in Buddhism. The forte of some of them is the frame of mind, so they cultivate spells and divine arts, while others are known for their wisdom and cultivating knife and sword skills. There are also those of the battle technique school, whose forte are divine arts of the corporeal body. Even though Vajra unbeatable technique took the path of the battle techniques, it was different from others. Some spells were mixed into this technique. However, unlike Chancellor Bashan's fusion of battle techniques and spells, the spells of Vajra unbeatable technique were hidden in the monk staff or prayer beads. Through the daily cultivation with their monk staff and prayer beads, the monks would chant the Buddhist scriptures non-stop, refining their evil thoughts into the prayer beads and the divine arts in the Buddhist scriptures into the monk staff. When it came to battle, they could release the evil thoughts in their prayer beads, transforming into a fiendish battle stance, while the spells in the monk staff were methods to catch an enemy off guard with a surprise attack. Qin Mu had experienced the strong points of Vajra unbeatable technique before. This technique would turn one's body incomparably durable after executing the body of Vajrayaksa, to the extent that the person could take on the blow of Junior Protector's sword. Furthermore, the monk's strength would become so outrageous that he could push Qin Mu's treasure ship down. Qin Mu executed Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique, and his body trembled. A ray of golden light shot down from the sky and poured into him, transforming his corporeal body into a golden god. Tiger claws, fur, and head grew out from his body while he stepped on twin dragons and held a bronze battle-axe formed from golden chi, which was like a huge hatchet. A golden snake hung on Qin Mu's left ear and hissed while taking in and sending out golden chi. What he had executed was Venus Sovereign Gold Marquee technique, a god transforming into the form of Venus Sovereign to control all the gold chi in existence. There were many secrets hidden in 5 Elements realm, and Qin Mu originally had an extremely high achievements in it. With the guidance of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, cultivating the god transformation of the 5 great star sovereigns had allowed him to surpass the other strong practitioners of 5 Elements realm by leaps and bounds. Truly the spell of devils. Monk Banshi saw his body transforming and sneered. The 9 rings of his monk staff danced in the breeze and swelled up before smashing down suddenly like a huge hammer with 9 golden rings. As Qin Mu's bronze battle-axe clashed with the 9-ringed monk staff, a terrifying power exploded from the both of them. Qin Mu moved back repeatedly from the vibrations, and the twin dragons under his feet flew out to climb onto Monk Banshi's body, tangling with his legs. At the same time, the golden rings of the 9-ringed monk staff flew out one after another and hit Qin Mu's head, causing sparks to fly out in all directions. Qin Mu ended up tumbling back a distance away. Monk Banshi was of the 6 Directions realm after all, and he was a divine arts practitioner with a lot of tricks up his sleeves. With a trample, both of the golden dragons were shattered into pieces. Once he grabbed his monk staff and leaped back up in the air, the 9 golden rings whooshed back onto his monk staff while he was in mid-air. Boom! Monk Banshi smashed his monk staff downwards onto Qin Mu. His feet were on the ground, but he couldn't stop himself from sliding backwards, plowing a deep pit in the ground. The bronze battle-axe in his hand was also smashed into pieces. Monk Banshi rushed over at an extremely fast speed and was in front of him in a few steps. His monk staff swept forward, and another loud boom rang out as he smashed Qin Mu repeatedly until the other couldn't get a stable footing and flew backwards. The monk staff hummed while the 9 golden rings clanked as they smashed onto Qin Mu's chest, throwing him hundreds of yards away and destroyed a part of the forest. Mount Merumadra Tut. Monk Banshi rose into the sky and started to chant an incantation as he smacked Qin Mu down with a palm. The ground trembled and the trees collapsed, revealing a handprint that was the size of 3 Aries, deeply imprinted into the ground. In the meantime, an apparition of Mount Meru materialized above this handprint, with countless symbols of Buddhist texts swirling it. Amitba, the demon of the devil path, has finally been executed, due to a virtuous achievement of this little monk. Monk Banshi landed on the ground holding the monk staff with one hand while the other was in front of his chest. Standing outside of the handprint, he paid his respects. Little Monk isn't a person that's fond of killing, and exhibiting such a swift means today was merely to rid the evil from this world. There was no other choice. Little Monk shall recite a paragraph from the scriptures of rebirth in the Pure Land, sending the damned soul of the cult master to paradise, to not do evil anymore. Just as he was about to chant the scripture, he felt his hair standing up on end and immediately leaped away. The ground split open, and gold chi spikes rose up from the ground, frantically stabbing into the air. The monk staff of Monk Ban Chi smashed down, and the 9 rings swept in all directions, crumbling the gold chi spikes. He then saw the apparition of Mount Meru crumbling as gold chi gathered to form countless sword lights. They then gathered into one which was dozens of yards long and stabbed into the chest of Monk Ban Chi with a ding. The monk felt pain when his chest was stabbed by that sword light. He suddenly shouted loudly, and Buddha voice came from the prayer beads on his neck. Buddhist runes poured out from the vibrations, and the scriptures were like hoops that covered that sword light, layer after layer. As the scriptures continued swirling, they finally stopped the sword. At this moment, light suddenly flashed in front of Monk Ban Chi, and a huge wave rushed into the sky in front of him. Before it, Qin Mu transformed into a red-haired snake body of Water Marquis Mercury Sovereign, who was holding a trident in his hand. The trident stabbed towards Monk Ban Chi, and huge waves rushed up, transforming into a huge mudra which came pressing down on the opponent. Monk Ban Chi shouted loudly, and his Buddha rays shone brilliantly. He raised his hand to block, but found that a boundless strength was overwhelming him, smacking him away ruthlessly. The trident reached his chest and transformed into a 3-headed dragon, which surged forward while pressing onto his body. He heard a loud bang as it and the torrent slammed him against the ground, creating a huge pit around him. The wave dispersed and Monk Ban Chi immediately stood up. In his face was a bull-headed human-bodied monster, who rushed at him while stepping on 2 fire dragons. The heart of this monster's brows opened up, revealing its bull eye, and a beam came rushing over at a speed of lightning. Monk Ban Chi raised his hand to defend his neck and felt a searing pain on his palm. 2 of his fingers had been severed. Panic started to arise in his heart. He grasped the 9-ringed monk staff with a hand and used it like a hammer. The head of the staff swelled up, becoming larger and larger. The staff then was like a mountaintop smashing forward, while his other hand made a mudra which smashed forward. Qin Mu transformed into Mars Sovereign's form and gave an angry bellow. His strength was boundless, and a fire bottle gourd appeared behind his back. When he took this fire bottle gourd into his embrace, blazing true fire spewed out from inside it, and the flame scorched the 9-ringed monk staff red hot. Molten gold leaked out from it continuously. Monk Ban Chi was astonished. 9-ringed monk staff was the spirit weapon he had painstakingly refined and one which had the blessing of Buddha. Yet it couldn't defend against the true fire from this bottle gourd, and if it was melted, he would lose a major weapon. However, now was not the time to think it through. He could only risk his spirit weapon getting destroyed and brace himself to smash Qin Mu to death. Bang! The fire bottle gourd exploded from the attacks, and the 2 fire dragons under Qin Mu's feet also shattered into pieces. Monk Ban Chi immediately followed up with Mount Meru Mudra, and Qin Mu's body suddenly trembled. A ray of green light shot down from the sky, and he transformed into the form of Wood Marquis Jupiter Sovereign, which had a human head, bird's body, and bird feet. With 2 wings on his back and 2 green dragons under his feet, he flapped his wings and rose into the sky to avoid Mount Meru Mudra. Once he came into the sky above Monk Ban Chi, the willow whip in his hand came smacking down against Monk Ban Chi. The moment the monk raised his hand to defend against the whip, he felt that something was wrong. This whip was actually incomparably soft and coiled around his arm like a green snake. The willow whip then suddenly grew and coiled around his whole body. In the blink of an eye, the willow whip had become thick as a water barrel, turning into a willow tree which coiled around its target tightly. At the same time, the 2 green dragons under Qin Mu's feet were shrinking as they transformed into 2 trails of green chi, which entered Monk Ban Chi's nostrils. Arriving in this world empty-handed, leaving this world empty-handed. 6 senses be sealed. Monk Ban Chi sealed his senses so that the 2 trails of green chi couldn't enter his body, and were then purified by his Buddha rays. The prayer beads on his neck exploded one after another, and evil thoughts poured out from them, returning to his body. the evil in monk Banshee erupted, and he gave a bellow. His corporeal body swelled up once again and shattered that willow tree in pieces as he gave an angry roar. When Grandpa Buddha gets angry, even the heavens have to give way. Demon, die! Just as he shouted that out, Qin Mu transformed again, turning into a human-headed snake-bodied form, while the gate of heaven influence appeared behind him. With 2 pigs slaughtering knives in his hands, he rushed straight at his enemy. Explosive sounds rang out endlessly. The Buddha rays and sparks burst out continuously from the surroundings of monk Banshee, and there was not a single scratch on him that was caused by the pig slaughtering knives. Grandpa Buddha had the body of Vajra. Nothing can break through it. Monk Banshee had a malicious expression as the monk staff in his hand smashed down frantically. Qin Mu's knives collided with it, and a huge bang rang out, which pushed the birds and beasts in the forest around them into fleeing. Suddenly, the knives in Qin Mu's hands cracked and exploded, unable to withstand the immense power of the two's fight. At the same time, the monk staff in monk Banshee's hands also exploded. Die! Monk Banshee screamed continuously, and his fists, which were as heavy as mountains, came raining down. Qin Mu roared in anger, and his muscles bulged as electricity surrounded his body. He executed Thunderclap 8 strikes, and the green dragon coiled around his body as he clashed directly with monk Banshee. The 2 small giants exchanged heavy blows in the forest when suddenly Junior Protector Sword flew out and stabbed into the huge sun behind monk Banshee's head at a lightning speed. Monk Banshee was astonished and immediately raised his hand to defend. At this moment, Qin Mu punched like sunshine, refining the yang soul in the sky. Monk Banshee's soul wavered for a moment, and he didn't manage to block that sword light, allowing Junior Protector Sword to pierce through the huge sun behind his head. His Vajra unbeatable technique was instantly broken, and his body started to shrink. Qin Mu sent another punch his way, and the bones in monk Banshee's body trembled violently as he grunted and retreated. Qin Mu's punches rained down like howling wind and torrential rain, causing pain to monk Banshee. He became more and more frightened, then turned around to run. With a few ups and downs, he had already escaped to the sky. Qin Mu paused for a moment as he looked at the sky. The speed of the escapee was extremely fast. He ran 6-7 miles in just a few breaths' time. Only then did he stop so a lotus could bloom under his feet to lift up his body, as he thought to himself, "This devil is powerful since he has too many tricks up his sleeves, but his speed isn't that fast, so he can't catch up to me. I can still reorganize myself." Just as he thought this, a loud boom rang out, and he immediately turned back to have a look. At that moment, he couldn't help being stunned when he saw Qin Mu breaking through the air like he was flying. His speed was such that the monk could not even see him clearly. Boom! Qin Mu's fist bashed into monk Banshee's face, and it caved in its entirety. The power of Tempest of the 9 dragons poured into his head and exploded with a bang. In the sky, Bloodlight was accompanied by 45 green dragons that bore fangs and brandished claws. Among their snarls, a headless corpse fell from the sky. "Dumb monk, I could let you run 10 miles first. Ow, so painful." Qin Mu descended and searing pain filled all his limbs, making him suck in cold air. The monk's Vajra unbeatable technique had made his body incomparably durable, to the point that even spirit weapons couldn't injure him. All kinds of divine arts were also useless against him, making this fight abnormally exhausting for Qin Mu. The power of monk Banshee's attacks was also astonishing, so Qin Mu's flesh had burst open. This was especially so because of the 9-ringed monk staff, which had almost shattered his head. Luckily, the monk's attacks were pretty straightforward, so he had still died under Qin Mu's hands. Divine arts practitioners of 6 Directions realm are pretty strong. I can't underestimate them. Qin Mu touched the bump on his head and sucked in cold air. He executed Overlord Body 3 elixir technique to circulate his blood and qi, so as to not let his blood clot up. 2 of his ribs were broken, and the flesh on his back was a bloody mess. These injuries were probably from when monk Banshee had smashed his Mount Meru Madra on him. Overlord Body 3 elixir technique had an extremely good effect on healing injuries, but it was still incomparable to spirit pills and miracle medicine. Luckily, the current injuries were not fatal. Let me return to the village first to heal up before finding Devil Ape. Qin Mu reattached the ribs that had broken off and threw the monk's corpse away. There was no rule to bury corpses in great ruin since the blood from the corpse would attract wild beasts which would devour it. At most, only the bones would be left. While if the luck wasn't in the dead person's favor, even the bones might not be left. Qin Mu returned to the village and plucked a few spirit herbs from the herb garden outside the village. He refined 2 furnaces of spirit pills, one of which was used to heal external injuries, while the other internal injuries. He then asked for some dragon saliva from the dragon Qilin to harmonize the medicine. The dragon Qilin noticed his beaten-up state and gave a bewildered look. However, he didn't probe into it. The dragon Qilin squatted motionlessly at the village entrance in a guarding pose like he had done at Imperial College. But Qin Mu felt that he might be guarding only in name. Instead, he was actually lazing off, unable to be bothered to even move. Dutian Devil King remained motionless as well. The dragon Qilin was too lazy to move, while he was fixed in place by Def. Qin Mu recuperated at ease. When night fell, Def still didn't return. The rest of the people in the village also remained away. The next day came, and village chief and the rest still didn't return either. Qin Mu's lungs were still aching, so he couldn't breathe in heavily, but the injuries on his ribs and back had already healed. If a person wants his injured lungs to heal faster, it is best for that person to steam themselves, allowing the medicinal gas to enter the lungs. However, there is no one to help me maintain the fire. The youth executed Overlord Body 3 elixir technique and slowly walked. He breathed in and out slowly, to let the injured lungs heal slightly faster. Suddenly he thought of a question. After New Year's, will I be 15 or 16 years old? His age was always a debate among the people in the village. Village chief and Granny had argued a few times over this but come to no clear solution. Granny C had picked Qin Mu in the swaddling clothes during spring, and he had been 2 to 3 months old at the time. She believed he was born before New Year's, while village chief believed that he was born after New Year's. If he was born before, he would be 16 years old. If it was after, he would still be 15 years old. During each and every New Year's, the two would fight over this matter, and he reckoned they were going to fight this time as well. As he was thinking about it, Qin Mu heard a buzzing and raised his head to have a look. He saw a few golden-colored insects flying over from the forest outside the village. He blinked, and the golden insects buzzed away, disappearing into the forest. More insects came out later on and circled around the village before disappearing back into the forest. That woman from Three Wonders Castle has arrived. Qin Mu's gaze flickered. The woman from Three Wonders Castle was much stronger than Monk Banshee, and could control swarms of insects. They were venomous and had been refined by her until they were like steel, able to bite cleanly through spirit weapons. The woman could control thousands of them. With such an amount, Qin Mu would definitely be unable to fight against all of them if they were to pour over at him all at once. He would be cleanly eaten in an instant. Rather than letting her slaughter her way into the village, why don't I settle it outside? Qin Mu looked around and came to Apothecary's herb shop. He carefully brought out a broken pot with a couple scorpions inside waving their pincers at each other. The barbs on their tails swept forward as they fought over the spirit pills Qin Mu had fed them earlier. He carried the broken pot out of the village, and the dragon Qilin took a glance at him before asking in a low voice, "Cult Master, what are you going to do?" "Fight," Qin Mu said ruthlessly. "Fight again," the dragon Qilin said with disinterest. "Don't come back with injuries everywhere this time." Qin Mu carried the pot to the riverside while a couple insects kept following him, hiding among the bushes and leaves. Qin Mu stopped and waited for a moment. He saw the number of insects growing around him as they lay down on the river's surface. It was like a layer of gold was covering it. The insects lured the huge fish of surging river over, and a couple of them leaped out from the water, wanting to eat the shining prey. However, when the huge fish leaped into the air and opened their huge mouths maliciously, the insects started chirping weirdly and became 3 yards long. They then pounced onto the bodies of the huge fish and started gnawing at them. Soon, only the bones were left, which fell back into the water. The corners of Qin Mu's eyelids twitched. The fish monsters of Surging River were very powerful, their strength comparable to that of martial arts practitioners of Spirit Embryo Realm and Five Elements Realm. However, in front of the venomous insects raised by the woman from Three Wonders Castle, they were unable to withstand a single blow. Heavenly Devil Cult Master. A voice came from downstream, and Qin Mu looked towards the source of it. He saw the woman from Three Wonders Castle stepping on the golden-colored insect swarm flying over from downstream of surging river. She couldn't fly, but the insects could. They surrounded her in uncountable numbers, and there was also a golden-colored female insect that was much bigger in size than the other venomous insects. The woman was standing on the back of this female insect. Qin Mu smiled sweetly and asked, "How may I address Big Sister?" Qiuyu was several hundred yards away from Qin Mu when she stopped her insect swarm to ask curiously, "Heavenly Devil Cult Master has such an important position, and should be the one holding supremacy under the heavens. Why are you so polite to your enemies, calling me Big Sister?" Three Wonders Castle had three wonders: insects, poison, and beautiful women. This woman had a heart-wrenching beauty. One look at her would make people ignore the scalp-numbing venomous insects. Instead, their hearts would throb violently from being struck by her beauty. Qin Mu shook his head. "Once I'm in great ruins, I'm no longer the cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult, and am now the child of my elders in the village. This Big Sister, if you are willing to let go of your grudges, I can invite you into the village for New Year's. The celebrations in our great ruins are actually pretty bustling with noise and excitement." Qiuyu said, "After killing you, I could return home for New Year's." Her complexion then darkened, and sorrow entered her eyes. "I've forgotten my home no longer exists. It was destroyed by you and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. My home is at Three Wonders Castle. My Grandmaster is True Lord Tian. My teacher is Tian Yofei. In the Battle of Daxiang City, Heavenly Devil Cult transported Eternal Peace Army into the city and killed countless senior brothers and sisters of mine. My teacher covered my escape only to die under the hands of Grand General who crowns the army." She seemed to be laughing and yet not laughing, crying and yet not crying. With a cold gaze, she said in a soft voice, "Heavenly Devil Cult Master, you were already the cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult then, weren't you? To be able to mobilize so many experts of Heavenly Devil Cult, there is none one else capable of this. You were the one who mobilized the experts of Heavenly Devil Cult to destroy the great cause of our volunteer army, to destroy our Three Wonders Castle." With an awe-inspiring gaze, she added, "I had gone back to Three Wonders Castle secretly, but it had already been destroyed. My family members were treated as rebels and executed in public. Heavenly Devil Cult Master, do you think I should kill you?" Qin Mu sighed. "You should. However, you shouldn't have rebelled in the first place. When you rebelled, you should have known that if the rebellion failed, this would be the only outcome for your family." Qiuyu took a step forward and said sternly, "Righteousness must be upheld by the people even in the threat of being executed. Justice may be won only by using the lives of people. Otherwise, where would the righteousness be? Where would the justice be? Even though I'm from the devil path, I'm willing to be this kind of person. Heavenly Devil Cult Master, no need to say anymore. Please make your move. I'll send you on your way." Qin Mu felt a deep veneration and said resolutely, "People who walk different paths cannot work together, young lady, please." Qiuyu shouted sternly, and her sleeves fluttered. Venomous insects swarmed towards Qin Mu from all directions, and they were too varied and numerous to count. Some would expand in the wind. The bigger ones would grow to 3-6 yards in size, while the smaller ones would become as big as a wash basin. There were others that didn't expand but shrunk down instead. These kind of venomous insects were the most dangerous, as the smaller they were, the harder it was to guard against them. They could tunnel into a human's body when they were not prepared and gnaw on their 5 viscera and 6 bowels. There were even some venomous insects that could swallow the soul and absorb the opponent's vital qi cultivation. Qin Mu opened up the pot, and his vital qi poured inside it. The couple scorpions jumped out and suddenly expanded, becoming over 60 yards long. The black shell on their bodies was covered with exceptionally beautiful and strange rune markings which lit up continuously. Terrifying aura swept through the air, and the insect swarm which was surging over suddenly dropped out of the sky like rain. Qiuyu was astonished and immediately turned to escape. Suddenly, the tail of a huge scorpion swept out and extended endlessly like a chain, hooking the woman and killing her in one strike. Qin Mu sighed. He saw these scorpions fighting over Qiuyu's corpse, which resulted in the waves churching in the river. When the waves overflowed into the sky, he activated the pot and the scorpion shrunk down. They returned inside and continued to fight there. Qiuyu's corpse had already been torn to pieces by them and sunk into the river, where it got washed away by the current. Qin Mu carried the pot back into disabled elderly village, and the dragon Qilin sized him up at the village entrance. He saw that youth wasn't too happy, so he didn't say anything. Qin Mu placed the pot down and pulled Dutian Devil King over. He punched, kicked, and even summoned wind and lightning over to strike the god statue several times before letting him off. Dutian Devil King lay on the ground motionlessly, having lost dozens of parts. He felt extremely grieved and grumbled, "When have I provoked you?" After beating Dutian Devil King, Qin Mu felt much better. Suddenly, he heard someone shouting from outside, "Heavenly Devil Cult Master is here. Everyone, come quickly." Qin Mu's face darkened. He went to Granny C's room and took the mirror which she used to dress and groom herself. When he walked out of the village, he saw a couple divine arts practitioners rushing over. He raised this copper mirror, and his vital chi poured inside it. The light from the mirror shined on the divine arts practitioners, and their souls flew away, having been scattered. Their corpses then fell from the sky. The youth returned to the village and placed the mirror back onto Granny C's dressing table, thinking to himself, "Will there be an end to this? Won't they let me have a proper New Year's?" Qin Mu's injuries had healed, so he brought the presents he had prepared for the devil ape out of the village, walking towards the Valley of Doom Suppression Palace. Just as he left, he saw a strange beast which was dragging a corpse. When it saw him coming, that strange beast immediately hissed and the fur on its neck stood up. The river water babbled as a couple strange beasts jumped out from the water and rushed for the other corpses. These strange beasts with the head of a fish and the body of a human stopped immediately when they saw Qin Mu and fell on the ground, afraid to move forward. Qin Mu paid no attention to them. During his 2 days of recuperation, divine arts practitioners from Eternal Peace had found their way over one after another. However, before they could enter the village, they were all gotten rid of by items that were lying around the village. There were plenty of items there that were extremely terrifying. Other than the insects in the pots, there was also the rake that gathered up the grass, the curtain in the smithy, the water cauldron, the sword pellets under Granny C's bed, butcher's whetstone, the trough used to feed the hens, and also the wash basin that was taken by the dragon Qilin to use as the rice bowl. There were quite a lot of people who were chasing after Qin Mu's life as well. Other than Long Jiaonan and that batch of strong practitioners, there were experts from other sections. Many of them had found their way here during Qin Mu's 2 days of recuperation. It was not hard to find disabled elderly village, since if they followed the river, it was only 1,000 miles away from border Dragon City, which was not far from Eternal Peace's border pass. That's why if they wanted to find him, they could easily do so. Qin Mu reckoned there were about 40 to 50 people who had found this place during the past 2 days. Of course, they were all dead people by now. Long Jiaonan haven't found her way here. Could she have gotten lost or was she killed on the way? Or, when Qin Mu was in the village, he always felt a gaze staring at him from outside the village. It was like a huge venomous snake was hidden in the dark corners, ready to pounce any time. She's nearby. Walking out of the village this time was also to lure Long Jiaonan out. This woman had a deep hatred with him. The demise of Dragon Rider sect was single-handedly caused by Qin Mu. If it was not for him summoning Dutian Devil King in Heaven Wave City, Dragon Rider sect wouldn't have perished so easily. Qin Mu came to Doom Suppression Palace and saw a lot of wild beasts there. However, the devil ape and the dragon elephant were not among them. He looked around and couldn't find any trace. The wild beasts in the valley sadly didn't know how to cultivate or speak, so he couldn't ask them where the devil ape had went. Qin Mu could only return back to disabled elderly village. 2 more days passed, and he finally couldn't sit still any longer. It was very close to New Year now, with only 2-3 days remaining, yet Granny C village chief, and the rest had still not come back. The elders of the village are truly worrisome. He went to Doom Suppression Palace once more and still couldn't find the devil ape, which made him even more impatient. "Fatty dragon, get up!" Qin Mu packed up his stuff and fed the insects and hen dragons once more. He then wiped off the fix word on Dutian Devil King's body and called the dragon Qilin. "Let's find them in the depths of great ruins." Dutian Devil King stretched his body and sneered. If a half-god existence like Def couldn't come back after going into great ruins, what's the use of you going? Qin Mu shook his head. Even though my strength isn't high, I have a helper. Devil King, you are from the heavenly devil tribe, am I right? Dutian Devil King said proudly. So you want to borrow my strength? If you treat me nicely, it's not impossible for me to help you. However, you beat me up for no reason and made me upset. Please me, only then will I help you. Qin Mu asked curiously. How can I please Lord Devil King? Dutian Devil King became excited and was about to say what he normally said, but he felt that something was wrong. If he said it, the one kneeling down and licking the toes would be him. Qin Mu said resolutely, if you put in all your effort to help me find them, I'll release you. How's this condition? Dutian Devil King's eyes lighted up. You promise? I promise. Qin Mu finished packing up and walked out of disabled elderly village, making the Dragon Qilin head upstream. Everyone had went to find the whereabouts of Carefree Village, and village chief had brought him upstream last time to the depths of great ruins, to the origin of Surging River where they had met numerous strange happenings. However, what they had found then wasn't Carefree Village but the moonship of Fengdu. Moonship had guided the jade pendant on Qin Mu's neck, because of which the pendant had floated up, luring Qin Mu to that place. He felt that if village chief and the others wanted to find Carefree Village, they would definitely start their search there. They also might have left some trails behind. The Dragon Qilin's speed wasn't slow, but compared to the speed of village chief, he was much slower. When village chief had brought Qin Mu, he was like a god giving off brilliant rays in the darkness, moving at an extremely fast speed. Qin Mu could only enter great ruins during the day. When night fell, he could only find other villages or ruins to avoid the darkness. Great ruins during the day and great ruins at night were two completely different worlds. Village chief had guessed that great ruins during the day was the real world, while at night, some dark world overlapped with it. If village chief and the rest had entered that world of the darkness and were brought away by it, Qin Mu would not be able to find them. He could only hope that village chief and the rest had found Carefree Village. Not long after he left disabled elderly village, a girl wearing a long dark green dress came to its outskirts. A red-colored earring that hung from her ear had stretched itself to look so, but it was actually a little red snake. Treasures are all around this village, I wonder if I can steal some of them, Long Jiaonan said in a low voice. Xiaohong, call some helpers. The little red snake hanging from her ear hissed, and huge red-crowned snakes slithered out from the forest. It slithered into the village, but just as it entered, a black spider sprawling on the spirit herb suddenly leaped up from the herb garden and landed on the huge snake's head to bite it. That huge snake instantly died, and its flesh and blood decomposed into mush which got sucked clean by that spider. Only the snake's skin was left. The spider became bigger and bigger. After sucking dry the huge snake, it spewed balls of true fire to burn itself out to return to its previous size and jumped back into the herb garden to hide. The corner of Long Jiaonan's eyes twitched, and she immediately turned around to leave. The den of snakes behind her scattered off in all directions. This village, not even celestial beings could enter it. The Dragon Qilin followed the river upstream for 6,000 miles. Qin Mu raised his head to take a look at that time. The sky was already getting dark, so he immediately surveyed his surroundings to look for a place he could settle. On the geological map of Great Ruins, there should be a place called Monster Management Palace. Maybe it's a place where I can seek shelter. Qin Mu recalled the geological map of Great Ruins and found his bearings. Suddenly, his eyes lighted up, and he ordered the Dragon Qilin to go ashore. Not long later they found the ruins of a palace, with some strange beasts already hiding there. Qin Mu entered the ruins of Monster Management Palace, and saw many skeletons of huge beasts all around. They were very quiet, not moving even when he entered. Qin Mu raised his head to size them up. The skeleton of the huge beasts in Monster Management Palace was simply too humongous. They were dozens of times bigger than the Dragon Qilin's transformation. If they were still alive, they would be 3,000 yards tall and be like moving mountains. Not long later, a couple Taoists came to the ruins, who were probably experts who had come into Great Ruins for experience. When they saw Qin Mu, they revealed astonishment, but they remained silent, setting their own fire to cook their meals. Qin Mu cooked up a few dishes and ate dinner before lying down beside the Dragon Qilin to sleep. The couple Taoists looked at one another but remained silent. They wrote words on the ground, and as they did that, the ground suddenly trembled. Bellows came from outside, and obscure and hard-to-understand voices spoke from the darkness, sounding like devil gods whispering to each other. Qin Mu sat up and saw the skeletons of the huge beasts suddenly shine brilliantly with divine light. The tremors of the ground grew more and more violent, and he saw the huge beasts suddenly raising their legs from the ground. These skeletons seemed to have come alive, for they walked out of the ruins. World-shaking roars came from outside, and there was divine light shining over through the darkness once in a while. Through these divine lights, those inside could see that the huge beasts had actually grown flesh and transformed into beast gods that were fighting with the devil monsters in the darkness. The Taoists were bewildered, and Dutian Devil King was also shocked. Qin Mu wasn't surprised by these strange sights and lay back down again. He then said in a low voice, "Dutian, stop looking, I've seen weirder things." Dutian Devil King said quietly, "Those Taoists are slightly weird." Qin Mu was unconcerned. "I know. One of them is Long Jiaonan." After a moment, he began snoring, and Dutian Devil King could only restrain himself from making a move. The battle outside the ruins lasted the whole night. When dawn came, the ground trembled as the indomitable divine beasts returned back to the ruins. Once they sprawled onto the ground, their flesh vanished. They turned into the skeletons that lay half buried in the soil, which was exactly how Qin Mu had seen them when he entered. The darkness retreated back like the flood, and sunlight shone down from the sky. The other strange beasts moved out from the ruins and dispersed in all directions. Qin Mu made fire again to cook breakfast while the other Taoists did the same as well. All of them did not say a word and ate their own breakfast. The dragon Qilan took out the wash basin from disabled elderly village which he had somehow hidden for this long, and placed it in front of Qin Mu to wait for his food. Qin Mu poured half a bucket of scarlet fire spirit pills and took out another wash basin, pouring half of it with Jade Dragon Lake's water. The dragon Qilan ate to his fulfillment, and they set off. The Taoists looked at one another, then extinguished the fire and followed closely behind Qin Mu. He stopped at that moment and turned around with a smile. "Is there anything I can help senior brothers with?" One of the Taoists retorted. "Great ruins are so huge, is this your home? We'll go our way and you will go yours. No one is interfering with you." Qin Mu smiled and continued forward. They had set off earlier today, so they reached the end of Surging River before sunset. Qin Mu saw a dilapidated village nearby, and his eyes lighted up. He made the dragon Qilan head over. The Taoists followed him in and saw that this village was in ruins. Spiderwebs were everywhere, and even the stone statues had been worn out by time. What was weird was that all the other ruins had strange beasts seeking shelter from the darkness, but there wasn't even one here. The Taoists were bewildered. Long Jiaonan, who was a beautiful female Taoist now, said in low voice, "There's something weird about this place." As she was saying it, darkness descended, and the temperature turned abnormally cold. A lonely boat floated over leisurely from another world with a lamp hanging at its bow. Under the lamp was an elder who was folding paper humans, paper horses, and paper boats. That elder came to the village and disembarked. Everyone shuddered as they felt their souls freeze over. The elder placed down a paper boat which floated away. One of the Taoists instantly noticed he had somehow landed onto that paper boat which sailed weightlessly towards the darkness. Astonished, he immediately looked over to see another him still sitting in the village. That was his shell. "Tao brother." Qin Mu executed Saturn's Sovereign Earth Marquee technique and transformed into a human-headed and snake-bodied form. The Gate of Heaven influence appeared behind his back as he greeted the elder. After saying a phrase in Yudu's language, he took out the portraits of village chief, apothecary, and the rest to ask, "May I ask Tao brother if you have seen them before?" The elder took a look and nodded. "I've met them before. They came to me to ask for directions." Fear arose in the heart of the Taoists in the village. This elder was standing right in front of them, but they couldn't see his face. Even though they were so close to him, the facial features of this elder were extremely blurry. They used all kinds of third eye, but they still couldn't see him clearly. Seemed like he wasn't a living person. Dutian Devil King also kept quiet out of fear and didn't dare to make a sound. This elder was Yudu's messenger of death, a god that was his subordinate. Nearly every world had such people, but the jobs that they were responsible for were different from one another. Some of them were responsible for guiding the wandering souls in the world of the living, some of them were responsible for extraditing the dead, and some were responsible for capturing the great divine arts practitioners that had escaped death. The orders of Yudu and the world of the living were handled by them. Dutian world had once experienced a war at a world destruction level that had nearly destroyed it entirely. At that time, skeletons of the dead filled the open ground and there were corpses everywhere. The sun in Dutian world was extinguished, and nearly everything was plunged into darkness. However, among the endless darkness, countless specks of light came out, and under each of them was a similar elder coming forward to extradite the wandering souls. Back then, Dutian Devil King had luckily survived the Great War, and become the ruler of Dutian. He had been considered young then and was hot-blooded. When he saw these messengers of death coming to extradite the souls of his Dutian people, he immediately went forward to fight, but he ended up severely injured and almost had his soul taken away. Because of this, when Dutian Devil King saw this messenger of death, he was still slightly afraid and didn't dare to say a word. Qinmu asked respectfully, "May I ask where they had gone?" The elder raised his hand and pointed towards the darkness. "Carefree village. But they will never find that place and just get trapped. There's a messenger of death ready to take their souls." The babbling of water came from the riverside as the drenched men and women popped their heads out from inside it. They slowly walked towards the village with ashen faces, not saying a word. Paper boats flew out from the village, and these men and women boarded them. The paper boats then sailed into the darkness unhurriedly. The other Taoists in the village were greatly shaken and immediately moved far away from the strange elder. At this moment, they noticed that two of their comrades were not moving from their spots. On two of the paper boats that had sailed into the darkness, there were two figures that vaguely resembled the motionless people. The remaining three Taoists felt their hair stand on end. Long Jiaonan, who had donned a Taoist's outfit, was also shaking. She wanted to turn and run, but she didn't dare to escape because outside of the village was darkness. "Lower your head, don't look at that elder." An elderly Taoist came to realization and said immediately, "He is the messenger of death. If your gaze crosses with his, your soul will be taken away." Long Jiaonan and another young Taoist immediately lowered their heads, not daring to look at the elder anymore. Qinmu's tone became even more sincere. "May I ask Dao brother for guidance on the location of Carefree Village?" That elder continued to point to the darkness, not saying anything more. Qinmu frowned. The direction in which this elder had pointed out was the living realm of the dead. There was another netherworld there, which was where Fengdu was located. That time village chief and he had barged into the living realm of the dead. They had nearly not been able to come back alive. That place is not Carefree Village. "May I ask Dao brother, where is the real Carefree Village?" The elder shook his head and still pointed towards the darkness. Qinmu asked again, but the elder was no longer talking. Qinmu frowned, since he had no ability to travel through the darkness. Other than village chief, he reckoned it would be somewhat difficult for everyone else in the village as well unless they were able to carry the stone statues. He quietened down. There were no other sounds in the village, only the snores of the dragon Qilin who had fallen asleep. After some time, there were no more corpses walking out from the water, and the little boat that the elder was sitting on disappeared into the darkness. Everything in the village returned back to normal, and it wasn't as cold as before. Everyone let out a sigh of relief. By then, only 3 Taoists were left in the village, while Qinmu's side still had both Dutian Devil King and the dragon Qilin. The worn-out stone statues gave off ghostly light that forced back the darkness in the surroundings. Qinmu had a strange feeling, and he looked towards the female Taoist with a smile before asking the other two. Taoist priests look very unfamiliar. Where are you from? Between the two, one was much older than the other. Since Heavenly Devil Cult Master asked, "I won't dare to hide from you. Us master and disciple are from Heavenly Star Catcher sect. This hermit is Taoist Qi Yun and this is my disciple Xiao Yun." The other two have also been this hermit's disciples, but luck was not with them and they had their souls taken away by the messenger of death. Qinmu felt a deep veneration and said, "So you're experts from Heavenly Star's Catcher sect. Its master is called Sect Master Luo Xinghe, am I right?" "Sect Master Luo is my teacher who has already passed away. Taoist Qiyun said sadly. That day when Heavenly Devil Cult transported the mountain of Daxiang City, my teacher died in the hands of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. I see. Qinmu nodded. The cold wind in the darkness outside the village whooshed and howled. The few people in the village quietened down once again and didn't say a word. The two Taoists took down the sword cases on their backs and cleaned them carefully. Long Jiaonan smiled and gently stroked the earring hanging from her ear. Qinmu stretched his hand into Taotai's sack, but he didn't pull anything out as a smile remained on his face. Sparkling and translucent snowflakes floated down from the sky and landed around everyone. This night wasn't too peaceful, and the snow actually started falling as well. Dutian Devil King saw that there was something wrong with the atmosphere and secretly kicked the dragon Qilin. The fat dragon woke up and looked around before going back to sleep when he saw nothing abnormal. Dutian Devil King was furious. What's the point of raising a lazy bum like him? The snow grew heavier and heavier, and soon everyone was covered in a layer of white. At this moment, one of the many names of Buddha sounded out, and everyone was astonished. This name of Buddha had come from the darkness. Qinmu pulled out his hand from the Taotai sack. Long Jiaonan lowered her hand that was stroking the earring, and the two Taoists placed their sword cases down. Light came from the darkness, and a chubby-faced, big-eared monk came walking in. Looking around, he placed his palms together. Benefactors, sorry to disturb. Qinmu didn't dare to neglect him and immediately rose. We are also guests, so it's not considered disturbing us. Behind this senior monk walked a robust man who was covered in black hair. He had bulging muscles all over his body and was 5 yards tall. He had a thick devil chi around him and was like a human-shaped violent ape. With a monk staff in his hand, he cried out in astonishment, "Young-un!" Qinmu was also indescribably astonished. He looked at the monk's staff and recognized it as the Kakura staff that he had given to the devil ape. He cried out, "Big fella! What are you doing here? You changed your form." The demon-like ape was surprised and delighted. He came forward to acknowledge Qinmu before pointing to the big and fat monk. "Baldy little." Devil ape then pointed at himself and said in a low muffled voice, "Great Baldy teach. Baldy little." Qinmu was confused and probed. "What you mean is that this great monk is from Little Thunderclap Monastery? He found you and taught you abilities. He then left and came back to bring you back to Little Thunderclap Monastery." The devil ape nodded repeatedly. Everyone in the village was confused. Dutian Devil King muttered, "How did you even comprehend the meaning of what he was saying?" Qinmu was astonished. To be able to bring the devil ape to travel in the darkness meant that this chubby-faced, big-eared monk was in existence on the same level as old Rulai and village chief, a godlike existence. Fear arose in Long Jiaonan, Taoist Qiyun, and Taoist Xiaoyun's hearts. They secretly moved back as far as they could, to the point where they would enter the darkness if they went an inch farther. The three of them grumbled inwardly. The messenger of death earlier, and now the little Rulai of Little Thunderclap Monastery were all people Qinmu knew. Just a word from him could make them lose their lives. What they didn't know was that Qinmu was also extremely nervous. Little Rulai of Little Thunderclap Monastery was a demon cultivator. A great demon that had defected from Great Thunderclap Monastery. He was a great demon king. His comprehension of Buddhism was extreme. He had once used a copper Buddha to suppress the centipede Xian Qinger. That Buddha had then ended up getting pushed over by Qinmu, who had made use of the ice tide to save Xian Qinger. The chubby-faced, big-eared little Rulai looked really like a Buddha. He was like a living Buddha that had a dignified appearance. With a glance at Qinmu, he said, "So it's Little Benefactor. Does Little Benefactor still remember spoiling my merit?" The eyes of Long Jiaonan and Taoist Qiyun lighted up as hope was reignited in their hearts. Qinmu said, "I remember." Devil Ape stood in front of Qinmu and declared loudly, "Baldy brother." Little Rulai looked at him and shook his head. "Don't worry, my enemy is coming, so I won't make a move now. My enemy is here, so stay, I'll go meet him." Just as his words were spoken, a laugh came from the darkness. "Little Rulai, you're pretty interesting to make a battle appointment late at night." In the snowy night, an elder wearing a bamboo hat walked into the dilapidated village covered in snow. Qinmu was stunned and cried out, "Taoist Ling Jing!" The elder raised his bamboo hat, and his gaze fell on the youth. He revealed a smile. So it's the old sword god's disciple who borrowed Fengdu coins from me. Do you have the money to return now? Qinmu was embarrassed and replied honestly. Those Fengdu coins were all spent. Long Jiaonan Daoist Qi Yun and Daoist Xiao Yun's complexion froze again. Another top-notch practitioner that was able to travel through the darkness arrived. But he was also someone who Heavenly Devil Cult Master Qinmu was familiar with. How many godlike existences did this Heavenly Devil Cult Master know exactly? It's not late to pay me back in the future. Daoist Ling Jing took off his bamboo hat and placed it beside a wall. Looking at little Rulai, he said without hurry, "Heavy snow and dark sky, what a great time for murder. Little Rulai, let us go farther away to fight." All right. The two top-notch practitioners went into the darkness, and the village was silent once again. Qinmu looked at Long Jiaonan and her two companions who were also looking at him. The few of them remained motionless. The devil ape saw this situation and was bewildered. Terrifying pulses came from far away, and the snow in the sky turned into fine rain pattering down. The divine arts of Daoist Ling Jing and little Rulai melted the heavy snow in the dark night, turning snow into rain. Snowflakes fell from the sky at times, but at others they were turned into fine rain. It was hard to say for how long this lasted when suddenly the crows of roosters came from the darkness. The darkness rapidly surged back towards the west. And at this moment Qinmu, Long Jiaonan, Dutian Devil King, and the rest sprung into action. They instantly delivered killing blows at one another at nearly the same time. The dragon Qilin roared angrily and shook himself, revealing his true form. With blazing fire around his body, he raised his front claws to press down on the head of the red snake pouncing over, smashing it into the ground. Qinmu rushed toward Daoist Qi Yun's side in an instant, while Daoist Qi Yun's countless swords were blocked by Dutian Devil King, who was standing behind Qinmu's back. The devil ape leaped up from behind Dutian Devil King and smashed his Kakura staff onto Daoist Qi Yun's head. Kai! A sword light pierced Daoist Qi Yun's chest, and with a flick of Qinmu's finger, that sword light went slicing horizontally through the neck of Daoist Xiao Yuan, who was still in a daze as well. Long Jiaonan grabbed the tail of the huge snake, and it shrunk in size. The woman rose into the sky and disappeared in a flash. Thud thud. The corpses of Daoist Qi Yun and Daoist Xiao Yuan collapsed onto the ground. Qinmu put away his sword and raised his head to have a look. Long Jiaonan had already gone far away. The speed of the red snake really fast. It wouldn't be easy to catch up to her. Tonight, the messenger of death will have wandering souls to take away. It's just a pity that we didn't manage to send Long Jiaonan on her way as well. This woman is indeed very intelligent. She had also managed to escape in the battle in Heaven Wave City. Qinmu let out a sigh of relief. Now that Long Jiaonan was left by herself, it would be difficult for her to achieve anything. If she dared to come after him again, she would certainly die. The main reason why this battle had gone so smoothly was mainly due to everyone's coordination. After all, Daoist Qi Yun's cultivation and strength weren't low, and he wasn't any weaker than Long Jiaonan. Since Daoist Qi Yun carried a sword case, it meant that he was most proficient in sword battles. With Dutian Devil King blocking his swords with his 8 arms, Qinmu could rush to Daoist Qi Yun's side without any worry. The Devil Ape's power lay in his incredible strength. With the Kakura staff and Rulai's Mahayana Sutra, the Devil Ape's strength was enough to stun Daoist Qi Yun, so Qinmu could take his life in a single attack. Long Jiaonan's battle prowess lay mainly in the huge red snake, which was almost a flood dragon from all the refinement. The dragon Qilin, however, was a perfect match for the red snake. Once he pressed down the red snake with his strength, Long Jiaonan was no longer able to save Daoist Qi Yun. Because of this, the old man was doomed. However, now that Long Jiaonan had escaped, Qinmu wasn't able to chase her because he would definitely die if he went after her. His companions, Dutian Devil King, the Dragon Qilin, and the Devil Ape, sadly were not fast enough to catch up to her, so they could only let her escape. Big fella, did little Rulai of Little Thunderclap Monastery give you trouble? Qinmu asked. The Devil Ape shook his head and pointed at himself. My name Kong. Qinmu waited for a moment. The Devil Ape was probably talking about his name and religion, but what religious name was only one word? Was it really Kong? And if not, then what was Kong? The Devil Ape thought that he had already understood and didn't say a word more. This devil ape treated his words like gold and would never say an extra one. It's good for you to follow Little Rulai to cultivate. Little Rulai knows Rulai's Mahayana Sutra, and is a strange beast that achieved the Tao, so he's the most qualified to guide you on your cultivation. Qin Mu waved his hand and said, "My elders are lost, so I have to go find them and can't stay here any longer. Come home when you're free, Linger misses you too." The two of them bade farewell. Qin Mu followed the direction pointed out by the messenger of death, and this time he no longer felt Long Jiaonan's gaze on him. The girl must have believed that she couldn't kill him and thus retreated. I wonder how the battle between Little Rulai and Taoist Ling Jing went. Even though Qin Mu kept thinking of that fight, finding village chief and the rest was more important. He sat down on the forehead of the dragon Qilin, who began running forward, while Dutian Devil King chose to stand on the back, his four faces looking in four directions to take note of any movement in the surroundings. The deeper they went into great ruins, the stronger the strange beasts became. The abilities of some of them were no inferior to those of the dragon Qilin or the huge red snake. Luckily, most of these strange beasts had their own territories. Having lived in great ruins since he was young, Qin Mu was quite the expert in differentiating between the territories of strange beasts, so they could easily avoid them on their journey and stayed relatively safe. If we continue on, we'll reach Eastern Heavenly Gates. Qin Mu recalled the geographical map of Great Ruins, and the place in it called Eastern Heavenly Gates. Besides it, there were 3 more places that had the name Heavenly Gates, and they were obviously Northern, Western, and Southern Heavenly Gates. At that moment, the dragon Qilin suddenly stopped and sniffed the air. There's a scent of blood. This fellow is a huge dog and not a dragon Qilin, Dutian Devil King thought to himself. Qin Mu's heart stirred slightly. Blood scent? Go and take a look. The dragon Qilin followed the blood scent, and after a moment, Qin Mu saw an old Taoist in the distance leaning against a tree while panting heavily. Taoist Ling Jing. Astonished, Qin Mu immediately called the dragon Qilin to a stop. He has placed a restriction around him, so don't step into it. Taoist Ling Jing raised his head weakly and took a glance at him. As he took a breath, he suddenly coughed violently and vomited out a mouthful of blood. The eyes of Sword God's disciple are extraordinary. I'm injured, so I placed a restriction around myself to avoid getting engaged by the strange beasts. Qin Mu said, Taoist, I'm proficient in the art of healing. Do you need my help? Taoist Ling Jing raised his hand and lifted the restriction. He wanted to get up but was unable to move, so he said while gasping for breath, Come over. Qin Mu had the dragon Qilin walk to the tree. He then jumped down from the head to examine Taoist Ling Jing's injuries. This elder was heavily injured, and these wounds were probably caused by Little Rulai. The crucial point was that Taoist Ling Jing was pretty old and his body was not like what it used to be. This resulted in the injuries becoming even more severe, making it difficult for him to heal naturally. Qin Mu mumbled to himself as he took out the dragon's saliva to treat external injuries. He then took out a few Spirit Buddha pills to repair the damage to Taoist Ling Jing's spirit. After that, he rummaged through his Taotai sack and took out some herbs he had bought in Imperial College for emergency usage. Even though there weren't many herbs, they were enough to create spirit pills for Taoist Ling Jing's injuries. Qin Mu made the spirit pills on the spot, with his hand techniques fast and perfect. Soon, a furnace of spirit pills was finished, and he let Taoist Ling Jing consume them. The complexion of Taoist Ling Jing turned for the better, and he said in astonishment, The disciple of Sword God actually has such high attainments in the art of healing. Little Tao friend, won't you be my disciple? I have a lot of enemies, and with you by my side you could assure my safety. Don't worry, even though the old Sword God is powerful, what I can teach you won't be any worse than him. Qin Mu shook his head. I'm the cult master, sacred teacher of Heavenly Devil Cult, so I can't become your disciple. So it's the Devil Cult Master. Taoist Ling Jing struggled to get up, then bowed in greeting with a respectful face. I thought I was above you in seniority, never expecting us to be senior brothers of the same seniority. Ling Jing pays respects to Devil Cult Master. Qin Mu immediately returned his greeting. Senior brother Ling Jing is too polite. Your injuries are not a problem now, but if you want to get rid of them from their roots, you will have to nurse yourself to health. Taoist Ling Jing smiled. Seems like it was the right choice to give you those 2 Fengdu coins. The old sword god still owes me 2 Fengdu coins, but I reckon that guy won't return them to me. He's pretty stingy, having even chopped off one of my fingers back then. He opened up his right hand and said, "See." The ring finger on his right hand was gone, and it was clearly a sword wound. If it was not for this broken finger, how would little Rulai of Little Thunderclap Monastery have been able to injure me this heavily? However, his injuries are pretty severe as well. Without a divine physician at his side, I reckon he will have to roll back to Little Thunderclap Monastery and suffer for 2 to 3 years before fully recovering. Taoist Ling Jing let out a pent-up breath. That fellow is younger than me and has a good foundation. He was the disciple of the previous Rulai and is the junior brother of the current Rulai. When the previous Rulai passed on the position to his senior brother, the little Rulai was indignant and felt that the reason why the previous Rulai had not passed on the position to him was because he was from the demon race. So he had slaughtered his way out of Great Thunderclap Monastery and founded Little Thunderclap Monastery. That's right, why are you wandering in the depths of great ruins alone? Qin Mu mixed a few herbs together and brewed a medicinal decoction. The elders of my village have lost their way, so I've come out to look for them. Elders of your village? Taoist Ling Jing was bewildered. It's none other than Old Sword God and the other elders. Among them are Jade Face Poison King, Thief God Ma Wangshen, and also my Heavenly Devil Cult Patriarch. Has senior brother met them? Taoist Ling Jing was startled. Suddenly, he began laughing until tears almost rolled down his cheeks. The injuries that had just fused split open once more, and made this elder suck in a cold breath from the pain. Old Sword God and Heavenly Devil Cult Patriarch have lost their way? These 2 old goofballs, they actually lost their way. He laughed until he couldn't breathe, and Qin Mu immediately said, "Stop laughing, your wounds have opened up again. Has senior brother seen them?" "I haven't." Taoist Ling Jing shook his head. Qin Mu then took out the portraits of Old Ma, Granny C, and the rest to ask, "In that case, what about them?" Taoist Ling Jing took a look at the paintings and pondered. "I saw this blacksmith carrying a chest. His speed was very fast and his ability was no weaker than mine. When I met him, we even competed with our leg power. He didn't say a word and had a weird temper. It's rare to meet this kind of strong practitioner, but I had never heard of such an expert before." Qin Mu's spirit was aroused. "That's Grandpa Mute from my village. Does senior brother know where he went?" Taoist Ling Jing replied. "He went into a restricted area. It's very treacherous there, so it's one of the most dangerous grounds in Great Ruins. I chased him all the way to that dangerous land but did not go in. He's a mute? No wonder he gave me the cold shoulder when I was talking to him. Grandpa Mute went to a restricted area in Great Ruins?" Qin Mu became nervous again, and he thought for a moment before asking, "Has senior brother heard of Carefree Village before?" "Carefree Village?" Taoist Ling Jing shook his head. "I've not heard of it before." Qin Mu muttered to himself irresolutely for a moment. Taoist Ling Jing frequently wandered around Great Ruins and knew numerous secrets that no one else knew. If even he didn't know where Carefree Village was, Qin Mu had little hope to find Carefree Village by himself. He pondered over it before suddenly asking, "Senior brother, can I ask you for a favor? I would like to go to the living realm of the dead once more." Taoist Ling Jing smiled. "This is simple. When the night comes, I'll bring you there." Qin Mu calmed himself down and healed the other's injuries, so when the night arrived, Taoist Ling Jing had pretty much recovered. He immediately brought them into the darkness of Great Ruins and said, "Living realm of the dead is the territory of the King of Hell. This world is very mysterious and the 2 worlds only overlap at night. If you want to enter the living realm of the dead, you need to have Fengdu coins. I've signed a contract with the King of Hell to not go to Yudu after I die but straight to Fengdu." Looking around, he took out a token and shown it towards the darkness. The origin of Fengdu is very weird. It doesn't have a fixed location but floats here and there in Great Ruins, creating a very mysterious world by itself. I have a token of Fengdu, so as long as I activate it, an envoy of Fengdu will come and fetch me. Just as he was saying that, a light came shining over from the middle of 2 large mountains. Taoist Ling Jing immediately brought Qin Mu over there. That light was sometimes bright and sometimes dim, guiding them on their way. Without noticing it, They passed by a couple large mountains and got closer to that light only to see it was but a ball of a will-o'-the-wisp which suddenly vanished. The jade pendant on Qinmu's chest gave off a ghostly light then and slowly floated upwards to lead the way. Taoist Lingjing brought Qinmu and the rest forward until they passed through what felt like a formless barrier. The sight in front of them suddenly changed and the vastly mysterious living realm of the dead appeared in front of them. There they could only see a small boat sailing unhurriedly through the sea of fog among the countless white bone mountains. Taoist Lingjing brought Qinmu and the rest to the boat, and the skeleton inside brought them into the dense fog. After some time they reached the docks. The stone tablet of the living realm of the dead was right in front of them. Taoist Lingjing asked curiously, "Devil Cult Master, what are you coming here for? Your cultivation is too weak, so even if you sell your soul, Fengdu won't want it." Qinmu walked forward, passing by an empty village. After crossing the huge mountain in front of them, he saw the incomparably large moon ship that lay in front of Fengdu. It was like a three-legged toad that was carrying an enormous ship. Once he said it, he said solemnly, "I'm here to borrow a ship." "Borrow a ship?" Taoist Lingjing was stunned for a moment, while Qinmu sprinted over rapidly. He broke through in no time and landed on the moonship in a few steps. On his chest, the jade pendant which he wore since he was young floated up even higher, and the light coming from it became even brighter. Dutian Devil King looked around, incredibly shaken as he muttered, "Is this a god artifact? Visitor from Carefree Village." On the moonship, which was in a mess, the ruined star in the sky turned into fireballs which descended non-stop, making the situation quite dangerous. A strange trembling voice rang out, "You're from Carefree Village. What are you here for?" "I'm not a betrayer, I only escaped. Their deaths are not my fault, they're not my fault. I'm just a coward." Qinmu looked toward the source of the voice and came to the center of the moonship. In the middle of several huge pillars, a face of several acres that was stuck to the ground looked at the jade pendant floating in front of his chest in terror. "Not my fault, I didn't betray my tribesmen," that face shrieked. Qinmu hesitated for a moment, then let out a shaky breath and stretched out his palm to touch one of the pillars. Taoist Lingjing frowned. "I've been here before, and there was nothing here except for this lunatic. I've checked these pillars before as well, but there were no abnormalities." "Don't touch!" that face shouted in despair. When Qinmu's palm touched the huge pillar, an incomparably terrifying energy suddenly came pouring into his body. Cracking sounds rang out all around him as his body grew taller and bigger. The divine energy that came pouring in caused his body to undergo a dramatic transformation. He felt his tailbone growing frantically, turning into a third leg that grew out from his back and landed steadily on the ground. Bones and flesh also rapidly grew under his armpits, turning into arms. Bang! 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 Qinmu stretched out his arms and grasped the other pillars. Everything in his surroundings seemed to shrink rapidly, but that was just a misconception. He was actually the one becoming larger. Due to the divine energy of Moonship reconstructing his body, deafening explosions came from his body. This noise originated from all the divine treasures opening within him. In the blink of an eye, 6 directions, 7 stars, celestial being, and life and death divine treasures had all opened up. The divine bridge divine treasure had even opened up and reached straight to the opposite shore. Qinmu couldn't resist howling, and as he did so, the incomparably enormous moon ship gradually stood up. Then the broken moon floated into the distance. Taoist Lingjing's expression changed drastically, and he moved back continuously. Dutian Devil King and the Dragon Qilin were also forced to move back by Qinmu's aura. Even when they were thousands of yards away from him, they still couldn't get a stable footing. Meanwhile, under Qinmu's feet, the face of the Moon Guardian had sunk into the moon ship by the pressure from the feet. Originally, he had still been hanging by a thread, but when he got stepped onto, he fused completely with the moon ship, becoming part of it and dying. The old Moon Guardian died. Taoist Lingjing was shaken. The death of the old Moon Guardian didn't concern him since this person was a lunatic, but the growth of Qinmu's body attracted all of his attention. The youth had actually broken through the shackles of the living realm of the dead. When entering the living realm of the dead, even existence like Taoist Lingjing would have their blood and flesh stripped off, leaving him a walking skeleton. When Qinmu had entered here with him, he was also left with only his bones. It was the same for the dragon Qilin. While Dutian Devil King sported no changes only because he had no flesh or bones. And then not only had Qin Mu's flesh returned, his body had also become larger and larger, as if he was a heavenly god with divine light surrounding him. He replaced the last moon guardian of the moon herders to become the new moon guardian. The power which he controlled now was too strong, so it broke through the limitations of the living realm of the dead, which resulted in them being able to do nothing. This was something that was nearly impossible. Taoist Ling Jing had come to this moon ship many times and examined everything here numerous times. He had touched the pillars countless times, but he had never undergone such an astonishing transformation like Qin Mu. He had thought that only the moon herders had this ability and not even all of them, just the ones who had a special constitution. The human body is like a large smelting furnace. An ordinary moon herder should not be able to contain the terrifying energy from the moon ship, so only those with a special constitution could receive such a large amount of energy. The moon herders should have been wiped out, with this elder on the ship being the last of them. However, he had now also sunk into the moon ship and lost his life. For Qin Mu to be able to control the moon ship and its energy, could he be a moon herder, and one with a special constitution among his kind? However, Qin Mu was not a moon herder. Grasping the huge pillars was considered an abnormally dangerous act to other people, even if they were moon herders. However, it was very safe for him to do it. It was as if his body could naturally withstand this energy and automatically reconstruct his body and soul to handle it. What powerful energy! Qin Mu was surprised and delighted. The energy in his body had reached an unimaginable realm, which gave him a sensation that his previous power was like a water droplet in front of the ocean. It was simply insignificant. Now, with just a raise of a hand, he felt like he could change the landscape, to change and even control the rules of the world. Rings of moonlight covered Qin Mu's surroundings. Those rings seemed to flow down from the top of his head like flowing water, going down to the bottom of his feet before disappearing into the moon ship. His feet had already started to sink inside, fusing with the ship. This was moon ship's counterattack. Qin Mu had once seen this kind of counterattack on the body of the Sun Guardian of the Sun ship. Sun Guardian was Sun Herder Yan Jingjing. Since the sun of the Sun ship had been extinguished, she had to bear the counterattack of the Sun ship by burning her life to control and receive its immense energy. The longer she controlled the Sun ship, the faster her life was drained away. The broken moon above the moon ship was also extinguished and had no light emanating from it. For Qin Mu to control the ship and borrow its energy, the price was his own life. He had to move quickly and borrow the power and speed of the moon ship to delve deeper into the darkness to find Carefree Village, Village Chief, and the other villagers. Otherwise, the price would become too huge for him to bear if he wanted to break free. Senior brother Ling Jing, thank you for your help. Qin Mu looked down at him from above and said in a booming voice, but now I have to find Village Chief and the rest while the darkness is still here. Farewell. Taoist Ling Jing suppressed the shock in his heart and flew off the moon ship to float in midair. This Taoist was now a skeleton and the Taoist robe on his body had also become tattered. Raising his head, he said, Cult Master, please. Boom. The enormous moon ship took a stride. Below the body of the ship was the shape of a three-legged toad formed by the majestic mountains. With a step they could cover 10 miles. With a few steps, the moon ship walked out of the gate of Fengdu with its chains dragging the broken black moon still in midair out of the living realm of the dead. Meanwhile, in Fengdu, the strong practitioners all flew out to see the traces of the moon ship leaving into the distance. These strong practitioners of Fengdu didn't give chase. When moon ship had entered Fengdu back in the day, Yama of Fengdu had not received the Moon Guardian. He only let the moon ship stay at the wasteland outside the city. Now that the moon ship was leaving, Yama of Fengdu didn't bother to pay attention to it. A bird-headed and human-bodied mutant came flapping over and called out to Taoist Ling Jing. Taoist Ling Jing, Yama requests the pleasure of seeing you. Taoist Ling Jing immediately followed him into Fengdu and walked into the hall of Yamaraja. At this moment, tens of thousands of yards of light shone from Qin Mu's body, which made him look like a heavenly god that was crafted from a moon. He controlled the enormous ship to walk out of the living realm of the dead, cross the sea of fog, and enter the great ruins which were shrouded in darkness. He could feel the boundless energy in his body, and every single one of the divine treasure in his body was opened. No matter if it was spirit embryo, 5 elements, 6 directions, 7 stars, celestial being, life and death, or divine bridge, they were all filled with terrifying energy, and there was still even more energy pouring in. On the inside of the moon ship were incomparably complicated formations, and when his palm had gotten into contact with a huge pillar, the formations had been activated. Boundless energy poured into him to reconstruct his body, his soul, his spirit embryo, and allow his realm to surpass divine bridge, reaching an unimaginable realm, the realm of heavenly gods. It was hard to imagine what kind of realm this energy would reach if this was a complete ship. Carefree village chief, I'm coming. As the huge moon ship moved forward through the darkness, the scenery around it flashed past like flickering lights and passing shadows. The jade pendant on Qin Mu's neck had also become huge and floated up in the night to point towards a faraway place in the darkness. Suddenly, this jade pendant came off from his neck and flew into the distance. Qin Mu controlled the moon ship to increase its speed to not lose the jade pendant, which was flying swiftly through the darkness. As the ship moved faster, it compressed the space, which caused thunder and lightning to occur at the same time, tearing apart the darkness continuously. Above the moon ship, there were huge rocks crashing down continuously from the broken moon. As they streaked across the sky, they left trails of fire as they descended into the darkness of great ruins. Wherever the moon ship walked, meteors fell in its wake. This caused the surroundings of moon ship to be filled with fire and smoke, stinging the eyes. On the deck of the moon ship, there were too many palaces to count. This was where the moon herders had lived, but after a great battle, they had all been wiped out. The last moon herder was the moon guardian, but even he was consumed by the moon ship when Qin Mu became the new moon guardian. Dutian Devil King and the Dragon Qilin hid in a palace that had yet to collapse so as to avoid Qin Mu's world-shaking aura. The Dragon Qilin soon shut his eyes from all the shaking and fell asleep. Dutian Devil King was not sleepy, so he looked out from the window of the palace. He could see the majestic Qin Mu standing at the center of the pillars like a tall mountain. His power had materialized into the rings of moonlight that were falling down his body, and they were extremely terrifying. This world is not as lowly as I thought. These god artifacts require an extremely profound path, skills, and divine arts. It's not something that an ordinary civilization could create. Dutian Devil King's gaze wavered, and he found himself at a loss. Am I really going to invade such a world? What worries me are actually not the heights which the civilization of this world had reached, but the thing that had destroyed something like it. Countless monsters in the darkness of great ruins were alarmed and surged over. Even though these monsters were massive in size, they weren't that great when compared to the moon ship. They were like ants and were slow as well. The moon ship crushed all of them, and among the constant booms, crunching sounds could also be faintly heard. It was hard to say how many mysterious organisms had been flattened into pancakes and turned into a pile of mush in the darkness. There were countless devils pouncing towards the moon ship as well, and devil voices could be heard. These devils were trying their best to board this land ship, but they were immediately killed by the lightning created by the movement of the moon ship, and their corpses dropped down like rain. Candra Nava, Sanskrit, moon ship. In the darkness, a terrifying aura surged forth as a black figure became bigger and bigger. With feathers like clouds, it flew over from the darkness and leaped into the thunder layer formed by the moon ship, bringing devil clouds to invade it. From the devil clouds, the enormous devil popped out its heads, and all 9 of them spewed devil flames towards Qin Mu, who was at the center of the pillars. The blazing flames lighted up the night sky, and the body of the enormous devil rolling back into the clouds could be seen. It seemed like a bird, but a flood dragon as well. It was as if the devil was a monster that was a fusion between the 2 different species. Garuda! Dutian Devil King cried out in astonishment. Moonlight lingered around Qin Mu's body, blocking the devil flames. Suddenly, a crescent opened up in the heart of his brows and slowly turned into a full moon like a door opening. Soon, a full moon appeared in the heart of his brows. This wasn't a real full moon but an eye that was giving off a light that was similar to moonlight. Phew! A snow-white light flashed across the horizon and sliced apart the darkness. It cut through the devil flames that filled the sky, and the heads of the devil started to fall from mid-air. There were exactly 9 heads, no more and no less, while behind them were necks that were squirming like dragons and spurting blood. The full moon on Qin Mu's forehead slowly closed and turned into a crescent again, which disappeared as well. Dutian Devil King shut his mouth and didn't say a word. After this brat let me go, I'll definitely not invade this twisted world. The moon ship continued traveling forward, while devils continued to surge towards it. Suddenly, shrieks came from the darkness, and the countless devils suddenly retreated, disappearing into the darkness. Qin Mu's jade pendant, which was floating in front of the ship, looked incomparably small, as though it was a speck of dust. Suddenly, it clanked as though it had collided with a formless barrier. As if it was water of the lake stretching vertically from the heaven to the earth, ripples started to gently undulate on the barrier. They spread out with the jade pendant at the center, growing larger and larger. Meanwhile, at the center of the ripple, another world was gradually showing the tip of its grandeur. This was Carefree Village. Qin Mu stood on the majestic moon ship with his hands stretched out to hold the pillars. He was like a giant getting punished as he looked at the world that had appeared in front of him. Behind him, the broken moon floated in the sky while meteors fell down from time to time. As they crashed around the moon ship, the incomparably black darkness was lighted up. Behind the light, the devils were in a disorder. They were bustling with activity and making a commotion. In front of the ship, however, was a pure land that had never been invaded by the darkness. It was cut off from the rest of the world, tranquil, mysterious, and filled with the unknown. It was hard to imagine that there was such a serene place in great ruins. In front of Qin Mu were a vast forest and an endless mountain range. However, at a place farther away, the ground was suddenly cut off as if it was emptied out by someone. With the sea and clouds separating them, there was a city that stood tall and upright in midair. It was like the place where immortals lived. The sky was filled with golden clouds and light, while below palaces towered into the cloudy heaven. Floating high up in the clouds was an unbroken chain of mountain peaks which revealed their bright golden peaks. In the depths of the clouds, majestic god statues stood like an emperor protecting his territories. A huge machinery floated 3,000 yards away from the sky, operating quietly. Countless formations were imprinted into the mysterious iron and gold structure, forming an incomparably complicated large-scale machine. Energy produced by it materialized into trails of flowing light which connected the city and the sky. However, everything was already destroyed. Qin Mu was stunned. In front of him was a ruined Carefree Village. The one dazzling sky city was now a ruin. The palaces that towered into the clouds were riddled with holes, and the unbroken chain of peaks that was floating in the sky had been smashed and shattered. Broken rocks of all shapes and sizes floated in the sea of clouds while majestic god statues stood slanted, missing limbs here and there. In the middle of the sun in the sky was a huge black dot which had already swallowed more than half of the sun. Only the golden halo around it remained, looking like a golden hoop. The city above the clouds had been destroyed, and the great machinery that stood upright in the sky was broken as well. Its shattered components floated quietly around. Only a couple huge pieces of machinery remained operating, maintaining the barrier of Carefree Village. Not far from the moon ship, there was a horizontally inscribed board stabbed diagonally into the forest. On that toppled overly large inscribed stele, 2 words were written. They said Xiao Pao. The horizontally inscribed board was broken. A pang of sorrow suddenly surged through Qin Mu, and it grew frantically until it filled his whole heart. There was no Carefree Village in this world anymore. There was no place to be carefree anymore. This giant who was standing on the moon ship and holding the pillar seemed to be bearing the punishment of heaven as he lowered his head. He knelt down and tears dripped droplet by droplet onto the solid floor. The home that he longed for had already been destroyed, and nothing remained of it anymore. He had looked for such a long time, fantasized about his home in his dreams, his family, neighbors, and friends, but all of them had suddenly been shattered with the appearance of this world in front of him. It was like a drawing done on the sand, vanishing with the gust of a wind. There was no longer any home, any mother waiting for her son, any stern father. All of the things he had fantasized about were no longer there. He awoke from his dream. He was still the orphan adopted by the numerous old, weak, sick, and elderly people. His hometown was gone. Dutian Devil King raised his head and looked out the window to see the giant kneeling among the pillars. The giant that was shrouded in the hazy moonlight had his face facing downwards, so only the shaking of his shoulders could be seen. At this moment, Dutian Devil King could well imagine the youth's pain. When his Dutian world was annihilated, he had felt the same sorrow. He was inconsolable and couldn't suppress his emotions. While he was bawling, he blamed the world, and with his overflowing anger, he had fought with the messengers of death from Yudu, trying to save the lives of his clansmen. He was struck down countless times, and his body was broken along with his soul. Then, he had finally submitted himself to fate. In Qinmu, he saw himself the past, the him when he was young, the him that was about to be struck down and submit to fate. When life is weak and one's direction is lost, coming and going like a lunatic. When playing in the mud, it's hard to know the luminosity of a pearl. How many trials and how many hardships, how much obliteration must one suffer to temporarily return back to fear? Where is home? Where is my home? Qinmu gradually raised his head up with a cold gaze. His eyes were like the bright luster given off by the moon. When he closed his eyes, that light vanished, but when he reopened them, they were like two bright moons. As he stood on the moon ship, his emotions rose and fell as myriads of thoughts went through his mind. He was unable to calm down for a long time. I didn't come here to find Carefree Village, but to search for village chief, granny, and the rest. They are my kin, and disabled elderly village is my hometown. It's the carefree village of my heart. Qinmu composed himself and looked around. Suddenly, he saw a couple of stone statues placed at the border of the barrier. Even existences of the god realm would find it hard to travel through the darkness of great ruins, unless they were carrying god statues. However, god statues were extremely dense, and even existences of cult master level would find it hard to carry them. They would be unable to travel far with them. The stone statues at the edge should have been transported here using great magical power to force the darkness back. After entering Carefree Village, these stone statues were no longer useful and was thus left behind. Qinmu's heart stirred. Village chief could have brought apothecary to walk in the darkness and deal with all kinds of strange peculiarities, while Mute should have a method of his own to deal with the darkness. As for Old Ma, Cripple, Butcher, and Blind, they would have needed the stone statues to be able to move in the darkness. Old Ma, Cripple, and Butcher's body had already recovered, so they could walk a longer distance while carrying a god statue. No one knew the extent of Def's abilities, but not even ghosts and gods dared doubt the greatness of his painting skills. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was his hardcore admirer, who took honor in collecting his paintings. While what concerned Granny, the previous cult master Li Tianqing was hidden in her body, so she should be able to carry the god statue as well. These statues here should have been left behind by the villagers. In that case, they must have found their way here. Could it be that they entered this place and got trapped, which is why they couldn't return to the village for New Year's? Qinmu opened his eyes and looked around. Vigorous energy poured into his eyes, and he executed the 9 Heavens Eye awakening skill that Blind had taught him to its maximum. I'm here. Village Chief, Granny. I'm going to bring you guys back for New Year's. He didn't step into Carefree Village straight away, but first checked it out from outside. Village Chief and the rest were extremely strong, so if they had really entered Carefree Village, it wouldn't look as serene as it was now. There must be no lack of danger inside, because of which they got trapped. Even the moonship couldn't guarantee Qinmu's safety. His gaze landed on the forest in front of Carefree Village and saw the traces that Village Chief and the rest had left. The divine arts of great practitioners like Village Chief and Mute would cause astonishing damage to the surroundings. However, this wasn't the case by the forest. Although there were traces of a battle there, the damage wasn't extensive. Qinmu's gaze followed the traces and saw a few ruins in the forest. The path that Village Chief and the rest had taken went along them. The reason why the path was along these ruins was that this was the only path, the only safe way to enter Carefree Village. Other than this path, every other place was restricted. Qinmu looked with 9 Heavens divine eyes and saw faint rays of light which were extremely treacherous in the forest. However, he couldn't see what the restrictions were. These restrictions were extremely dangerous, so the path along the ruins was much safer in comparison. Qinmu continued to stare fixedly forward. At this moment, he saw a few strands of fine light bursting forth from a ruin which was about 300 miles away from him, but not far from the end of the forest. Qinmu's vital qi burst forth, and he plucked down the jade pendant from the barrier. Activating Moon Ship, He took a stride forward and entered the barrier. Then, a gentle tremor came over him, and he felt like he had crossed into another world. The darkness which shrouded great ruins instantly vanished behind him, and when he turned his head to look behind, he could see nothing. At this moment he suddenly heard weird laughter. Countless devils that had been hugging the body of Moon Ship leaped off the ship and surged into the forest like a flood. A devil god that had 2 heads and 5 tails rose into the air. She also had 8 long legs which had palms instead of feet, which she used to scurry through the air while shouting sternly, "Vadha, Sanskrit, kill." Dutian Devil King jumped in shock. He totally didn't expect that there would be so many devils secretly hiding on the ship in the cover of darkness. The devil god turned her head back and chuckled at Qin Mu, who was on the ship. "Fancy finding by sheer luck what one has been searched for far and wide. We had wanted to enter Carefree Village for quite a long time, so we must thank you for leading us here." This devil god was none other than that one Qin Mu and village chief had met in the living realm of the dead. It was also this devil god who had lured Qin Mu out into the darkness, after he had met the sun ship in Border Dragon City, to kidnap him. It was evident that this devil god had long ago hidden herself on the moon ship to wait for a chance. She seemed to have known that Qin Mu would definitely return to the living realm of the dead one day, and borrow the moon ship to return to Carefree Village. And now she had finally succeeded. "My children, take over the last of the Pure Land. From today onwards, this world shall be ours." That devil god cried out and brought the omnipresent devils to surge towards the other end of the forest. Qin Mu was expressionless as he gazed at these heavenly devils. Suddenly, a cryptic pulse came from the forest, and the flesh and bones of the tens of thousands heavenly devils that had surged forward melted away. Only their skin was left, but when the gust of wind blew past, even it turned into ashes and scattered away. The devil god who had rushed into the sky above the forest instantly rushed out. Saparami! A huge whirlpool appeared and sucked her in. Qin Mu had seen this method before. When fighting against the village chief, that devil god had created the space leading to the other shore and pulled village chief into it, trying to trap him there. Never had she then expect to fall inside it as well. Now she had executed this method not to trap anyone, but to avoid the danger in the forest by hiding in the other shore. Right then, a ball of fire rose from the forest, and a beam shot out from it into the depths of the space. In the sky, a trail of fresh blood flowed out, and the corpse of that devil god appeared fell down. Once it crashed into the forest, the corpse turned into ashes. On the moon ship, Dutian Devil King was quiet out of fear, his blood running cold. This goddamn world, can it not be so treacherous? The pure white moonlight in Qin Mu's eyes drifted like mist, and a booming voice sounded out as he muttered to himself, "Your deaths have affirmed my guess. This restricted area is not to defend against any invasion of enemies, but to prevent people of Carefree Village from walking out. It was left behind by the existence that destroyed great ruins." Dutian Devil King heard what Qin Mu said and was slightly stunned, then instantly understood what he was saying. This restricted area in the forest was not to defend against the invasion of enemies, but to prevent people of Carefree Village from walking out. If it was to defend against outside enemies, then only people who barged in would be attacked by the restricted area. Whereas here, no matter if people were trying to go in or to come out, they would all receive ruthless obliteration. The ruins to the side should be the path that the people of Carefree Village had opened up by force to escape Carefree Village, and not a path that had formed naturally. To understand the situation from the slightest clue, ordinary people would have never noticed this. The ones who taught this brat are definitely absolute villains that are incomparably cunning. Dutian Devil King shuddered uncontrollably. It was obvious that the heavenly devils that had clung to the ship hadn't escaped Qin Mu's detection. The reason he didn't reveal his knowledge was to have them test the path. Such a ruthless and sinister youth would definitely have absolute villains for his teachers. Dutian Devil King sized up the restricted area and thought to himself, "With just the moon ship, we can't enter this place. Moon ship is too huge, and if we barged in, we would definitely trigger the restricted area. If it was so simple for the restricted area to obliterate that female devil god, destroying the moon ship shouldn't be too troublesome either." Just as he thought this, the moon ship suddenly trembled and gradually squatted down. A huge tremor shook the enormous 3-legged ship as it lay down on the floor and stopped moving. Dutian Devil King immediately felt the heavenly god aura around Qinmu gave disappear, and he let out a sigh of relief. If Qinmu had driven the moon ship into the restricted area, even he would have been destroyed. Even though Qinmu had seen the destruction of Carefree Village, he still possessed his rationality, which astonished Dutian Devil King. He then kicked the Dragon Qilin awake. The Dragon Qilin shook his head and followed behind him while asking in a low and muffled voice, "Iron Lump, where are we?" Dutian Devil King became furious. "You slept all the way and still have the face to ask me?" The Dragon Qilin smiled. "You also don't know where we are? Apparently, you have also slept all the way." At the center of the huge pillars, Qinmu's body returned back to normal, and he pulled back his legs that had sunk into the ship. The body of the ship had fused with his legs, but since Qinmu's body had grown extremely gigantic earlier, he had left huge footprints after he had shrunk in size. This allowed him to pull out his legs. Qinmu stood up, and his mind immediately trembled. He was incomparably weak at that moment, and the divine treasures that had been opened up by the huge amount of energy from the moon ship closed one after another. Only Spirit Embryo and 5 Elements divine treasures did not leave him. The ship's energy was too great for the current him, so if he wanted to control it, he had to exhaust his life force as a price. Yan Jingjing has always lived on the sun ship, so she had exhausted way more life force than me. It's been really hard on her. Qinmu took in 2 deep breaths and consumed some spirit pills to supplement his body. He rose then and said, "Devil King Fatty Dragon, let's enter this restricted area." Dutian Devil King let out a shaky breath and said, "You're planning to use my knowledge and vision to avoid the dangers and find the villains of your village?" Qinmu nodded. "You are the Devil King of Dutian World, the King of Devil Gods. Your knowledge and vision are much greater than mine, so only you can bring me in." Dutian Devil King laughed out loud and said proudly, "That's right, only I can bring you in and out safely. You can lick my feet." Qinmu's expression changed slightly, and Dutian Devil King immediately changed his words as he laughed. "I'm joking, look at you. I can bring you in and out, but you must release me as you promised." "You agreed to it." Qinmu smiled. "Don't worry, I will definitely not eat my words. I can sign the Pact of Earth Count with you." Dutian Devil King shook his head. "No need for that. If we sign the Pact of Earth Count, I won't believe you anymore. You will definitely dig a hole for me to jump into." Qinmu laughed coarsely and thought to himself, "Dutian Devil King really knows me well. With just a verbal promise, I find it embarrassing to trick him. Grandpa Cripple is right, I'm still too kind." He jumped onto the Dragon Qilin's back and Dutian Devil King also got on. Fire clouds grew under the Dragon Qilin's feet, and they slowly descended onto the ground. Soon they reached the edge of the restricted area. Dutian Devil King was extremely nervous and spat out a few gears from his mouth. Even though there's a safe path here, this safe path was established from inside. If we follow it to walk out, there won't be much danger, but if we use it to walk in, we'll face quite some danger. You must keep close to me and not take the wrong path. If you trigger the restricted area, we'll all die. Qinmu immediately moved forward and opened up the god statue's chest to adjust the gears there. Adding a few more spare parts, he reminded, "Devil King, don't try to play any tricks or you will be trapped as well." Dutian Devil King replied in a bad mood, "Don't worry, I understand. Stick close." Qinmu followed after him, and the 4 faces and 12 eyes of Dutian Devil King looked around. His 4 mouths muttered as he saw through the dangers in the restricted area and did his calculations. Qinmu even saw Dutian Devil King using his Devil Chi to execute methods of space calculation. Countless numbers and runes moved in the air as he did incomparably complicated calculations. "Devil King, your attainments in algebra are extremely high," Qinmu said in astonishment. Dutian Devil King replied in a bad mood, "You don't say. If you don't learn your algebra properly, you will only know the form of most of the divine arts but not their essence. Can you teach me?" Qinmu asked with excitement. "I have a canon of supreme mystery which I still have yet to study thoroughly." Canon of Supreme Mystery uses the divinatory symbols of the 8 divinatory trigrams to represent 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. It's an octal number system which is quite thorny. Dutian Devil King said in astonishment, "Octal number system? You will have to use the 8 trigrams to calculate, which are heaven, earth, thunder, water, mountain, wind, flame, and lake. If you use numbers to replace them, it would be quite troublesome to calculate, but if you use the 8 trigrams as an abacus to operate the transformation, that would be much easier. We'll talk later, don't talk to me now. If I calculate wrongly, we are all finished. Dutian Devil King's attainments in algebra weren't extremely high, but simply too profound to understand for normal people. A sentence he had said without thinking gave Qin Mu the feeling of having been enlightened. He had been studying the canon of supreme mystery these days, but he didn't achieve much. It was too profound and calculating it was incomparably troublesome. However, if he used the 8 trigrams as an abacus, it would become an exquisite tool for calculation. All the problems that he had faced could easily be solved. There's not only the octal number system from the 8 divinatory trigrams. There is also yin and yang binary, for phases quaternary system. Qin Mu managed to deduce many things from one answer. There were many mathematical physics in canon of supreme mystery, but there were no tools of calculation listed there. After getting advice from Dutian Devil King, he finally had a chance to actually comprehend the canon of supreme mystery completely. If I wanted to do that, I would need to have a formation for calculation, the 8 trigrams of Taiji. Qin Mu took out the canon of supreme mystery and browsed through it. His vital qi transformed into the 4 phases of yin and yang before forming the runes of the 8 divinatory trigrams which floated in front of him. With a pull of his hand, the 8 trigrams of Taiji split into 49 copies. The yin and yang revolved, the 4 phases operated, and the 8 divinatory trigrams transformed. So that's how the Dian calculation in canon of supreme mystery works. Qin Mu looked at the transformation diagram and muttered as numbers formed in his mind. "Don't be distracted!" The back face of Dutian Devil King scolded him. Qin Mu immediately dispersed the 8 trigrams. With Dutian Devil King leading the way, he considered himself safe. Dutian Devil King was the ruler of Dutian world, after all, so his knowledge and vision far surpassed that of Qin Mu. Even though he didn't have the ability to break the restrictions in this restricted area, avoiding them were not difficult for him. In addition, the restrictions along the path had already been broken by people from the inside. Village chief and the rest had also broken the restrictions by force, so the journey was relatively safe. In no time they came to the first ruins and Qin Mu stopped. This place was a village with only 4 households. The pots, bowls, and stoves were all still here, but no one lived here anymore. Qin Mu saw 11 graves, but there was no tombstone erected. The yellow dirt grave was big, but he saw no clue who was buried inside. "This place is safe," Dutian Devil King said. Qin Mu walked into the village and looked around. Suddenly, his heart trembled when he saw a cradle in one of the households. There was also a wooden horse and a few infants' clothing on the bed which looked very delicate. On the chest of one of the pieces of clothing was a word Qin sewed on. Qin Mu took out the jade pendant which also had the word Qin on it. The youth closed his eyes for a long time. There were no tears in his eyes when he opened them, as they were long dried up. "Is this my home?" He walked past the kitchen stove and looked at the pots hanging above it, the bowls covered on the table. He wanted to find more items to obtain more information, but there were no more clues. He came to the door and suddenly froze. He stood there silently. There was a 11 word pasted on the door. Even though there was no wind and rain here, the passage of time had faded the handwriting. This 11 word meant that the owners of this house had married. They had married right in this restricted area. The small wooden horse in this courtyard must have been prepared for the unborn child by the owner of this house. The delicate clothing should have been tailored for that child as well. "It's time to go," Dutian Devil King hurried him. "Once this is done, I'll be returning. I don't want to stay another day in your goddamn world." Qin Mu sorted out his emotions and continued to head deeper into the restricted area with him. For hours later they came to another ruin. This was a small town with about 100 households. Outside the ruin there were rows and rows of graves. Qin Mu walked around and saw that there was a school in the town, so there should have been youths learning knowledge here. Once upon a time this should have been a bustling place where people came and went. Even there was the incomparably treacherous restricted area just outside. This place should have been brimming with life. Yet in the next village, only 4 households were left. They continued to venture forward. And the third ruin was a city. Huge pieces of shattered spirit weapons were scattered all over the ground here. If these were sold in Eternal Peace Empire, one would definitely become the richest person in the world, but here they just lay all around. Let's continue, Chinmu said solemnly. We're so dead. Granny C's angry voice came from the distance. You old geezers, you even got this old woman fall for it and die alongside you. At the end of the forest, Blind's expression became solemn. He propped himself on his cane to rest while Butcher swung his knives. Around them was a layered space that kept changing in a peculiar way. This space was layered, and every time it changed, the scenery would transform as well. Sometimes it was a vast forest, and sometimes it was a blistering hot desert. Sometimes it was waves overflowing to the sky, and sometimes it was stars from space flying into their faces. Every time it changed, a different restricted law would burst forth. When the power of the divine restrictions hidden in the space activated, Butcher would need to clash with them. Butcher shouted angrily. Blind Granny, my waist is about to break. Have you two finished resting? Blind sighed. I'm old and my bones aren't like before, let me rest a while more. I ain't much younger than you, Butcher said angrily. Furthermore, my lower body was just reattached and it's not as strong. If I have to continue fighting, my upper and lower bodies will separate for you to see. Blind said slowly. Granny is still young, let her take over. An old voice came from Granny C's mouth and sneered. Even though I'm very strong, my wife's body can't withstand it anymore. Wife, let me take over your body. Scram! Granny C said angrily. Butcher and Blind's expression turned weird. Granny C's illness was becoming more and more severe. After she had found them and they met danger again and again, Li Tianqing frequently jumped out and took control of her body. The Devil's Seed is becoming stronger and stronger. Old Woman C will be replaced by Li Tianqing sooner rather than later. The changing of the space around them was like a god throwing a dice. Each side of the dice represented a divine restriction, and they were in that dice. On which side the dice landed on, the divine restriction on it would activate. However, this wasn't a 6-sided dice, but one which had 108 sides. Now they landed on the side of the stars, and the land under their feet disappeared as their surroundings transformed into a boundless starry sky. There was nothing above them and no land below them. The flashing stars were not real stars but mirrors. Suddenly, the lights from them gathered together and shone at the trio with a hum. Butcher shouted out and slashed at the terrifying divine light. With every cloud has a silver lining. The divine light split into half and brushed past their bodies, destroying everything that was not immediately behind Butcher. Granny C immediately shouted, Def, come here quickly. On the other side of the starry sky, Def drew with a brush and contended with the stars. Blind said, Def can't hear your voice. Before he could finish saying that, Def tried to fly over. A starlight unexpectedly hit him, and he was blown away, disappearing somewhere. Butcher, rest for a while, it's my turn. Li Tianqing's voice said from Granny C's mouth. Butcher immediately moved back, and Granny C went forward. The body circulated great educational heavenly devil scriptures, and carefully looked at the changes of the space surrounding them. It was not only the three of them who were trapped in the layered space. Deaf, Old Ma, and Cripple were also trapped, but they were in different sides of the dice, which made it difficult for them to regroup. When Granny C came and saw Blind and the rest trapped inside, she had tried to unravel this restriction, but to her surprise, she had fallen in as well. Later, Deaf found his way here and also tried to solve this restriction but got swept in instead. This space restriction has 108 divine restrictions, but the central administration that operates these formations is not within this 108 sides. Blind stood up, and his god-mind's eyes were as penetrating as a mirror as he looked in all directions. Our bodies are in the dice of a god. Old Ma and Cripple are on another side, but they still land in the same side sometimes. Deaf will also enter this plane once in a while, which means that the space restriction had operated for too long, and there is already slight deviation in its mathematical calculation. He did some mental calculations, and his eyebrows suddenly rose. The god that laid down this space restriction had only calculated to the Shunshi decimal fraction. He didn't calculate to the smallest decimal. After this divine restriction operates for a period of time, it will crumble by itself. By then, the space restriction had changed into the volcano whose divine flames were like dragons. with thunder and lightning booming out. Granny C tried her best to contend against them as Li Tianqing spoke with her mouth. How much longer until this restriction crumbles by itself? Blind calculated for a moment and said, 24,000 years. Shut up, Blind, Butcher shouted out, wanting nothing more than to hack him into half with a knife. At this moment a voice came from outside. Brat, your elders are trapped inside, there are 6 of them. In the space restriction, everyone was astonished and looked outside, but they couldn't see anything. Blind was extremely nervous as he commanded sternly, Moor, don't come in. You don't have the power to withstand the divine restrictions. Qin Mu's voice came from outside. Devil King, do you have a way to save them? This space restrictions use a secret technique of space matrix to layer 109 spaces, separating them into 108 sections. It might look like there is 108 of them, but there's actually 109. That voice then continued, however, the god that laid down this secret technique of space matrix should have taken the easy way out and not calculated all the way to the smallest possible decimal, which was why some flaws were left. This secret technique will automatically crumble after operating for 24,000 years, but if one managed to find the 109th space, it shouldn't be hard to solve this. Give me a moment to calculate. In the space restriction, Granny C, Butcher, and the rest looked at one another. The person beside Qin Mu sure is remarkable, to be able to see the marvel of this restriction with a look. He's much more reliable than Blind. After a while that voice spoke again. Do you have some treasure you don't use? Something that's quite solid so I can throw it into the 109th space. If a solid thing entered that place, it would be something like an extra object appearing in operating gears automatically jamming them. This formation would then be naturally solved. Qin Mu's then said, I picked this up in Roland's Golden Palace, is it useful? This treasure isn't bad. For you to pick up this kind of treasure you sure are lucky. No wonder I couldn't trick you. Your luck is heaven-defying, so it's not me that's incapable. Just as he was saying that, Granny C and the rest saw a luminous pearl flying in front of them. That pearl grew bigger and bigger until there seemed to be mountains and rivers within. It was as if there was a complete world in the pearl with majestic mountain ranges and never-ending waterfalls. The luminous pearl streaked across the horizon, having become an enormous object. The circular sky had mountains and rivers which disappeared the next instant. Be careful, when the restriction is unraveled, it will be a little rough, the voice outside warned. Just as he finished, violent tremors suddenly came from the depths of the space. The layers of space crumbled one after another, while the land, water, fire, and wind poured forth frantically, sweeping across everything. The power of the divine restrictions in each layer of space cracked, and terrifying energy spewed out in all directions. The people who were in the restriction immediately roused their vital chi to execute their strongest defensive methods to fight against this violent energy. Luckily for them, this energy wasn't directed at them but was simply spewing out in all directions, so they could still handle it. If it was directed at them, they would have definitely been shattered into pieces. Qin Mu stood in front of a part of the forest which had suddenly turned into ashes. The surging shockwave had swept in all directions and turned all trees into fine powder. Thud, 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 thud. For figures appeared out of nothing and crashed heavily against the ground, creating pits beneath them. Qin Mu shook his head. So old yet can't spare people from worrying. Cripple, move away. Deaf's voice came from above as this elder fell upside down from the sky. Below him, Cripple gave a grunt as Deaf crashed onto him. In midair, the aura of Buddha shone brightly as a huge Buddha descended. A golden spring poured out from the ground and a lotus bloomed inside it. The huge Buddha placed his legs down and stepped onto the lotus. The lotus and golden spring vanished, and the great Buddha dispersed, turning into an elder in green. He was none other than Old Ma, and despite his clothes being slightly tattered, he was in a much better state than the rest. Everyone got up and looked at one another. They had actually survived and come out of that space. Even though they had all suffered heavy injuries, none of them were fatal. Everyone raised their heads to see Qin Mu standing in the distance. The youth of disabled elderly village kept shaking his head in disdain at them, becoming even more unreliable as they got older. In front of Qin Mu stood a proud iron lump. With his 8 arms on his waist, he was like a lantern and had a look that expected them to worship him. Behind Qin Mu was a dragon Qilin that was as fat as a pig. He looked like he still hadn't fully woke up from sleep and was sluggish, having no interest in anything. Muir, why are you here? Granny C was astonished and came forward to size Qin Mu up. After examining him, she grumbled. How dare you barge into such a dangerous place? You're too gutsy. Are you hurt anywhere? Granny, stay farther away from him. Blind went up, slightly nervous as he looked at Qin Mu. Granny C is somewhat unable to handle the devil's seed in her Dao heart. She's sometimes male and sometimes female, and we don't know when she'll be taken over by Li Tianqing. Be careful of her laying her hands on you. An old voice came from Granny C's mouth, which was filled with a devilish nature. Don't worry, he is the current cult master of our sacred cult. As the previous cult master, I naturally won't lay my hands on him. Suddenly, Granny C's voice became female again. Li Tianqing, go back. Cripple went forward and sized up Dutian Devil King, who had his 8 arms on his waist. Muir, your iron lump sure is useful. What's his name again? Old Ma said. Dutian Devil King. Butcher came forward to have a look and asked suspiciously. Where did you get him? The last I saw you, you didn't have this iron fellow. He's still pretty useful. So ugly, Def said. Dutian Devil King became furious and wanted to blow up, but Qin Mu swiftly interrupted. This is Dutian Devil King, the supreme ruler of Dutian world, which I have invited to save all of you. He has extremely high attainments in divine restrictions, so he can definitely bring us to safety. Dutian Devil King instantly became happy. This brat still knows what to say, even though his intentions are a little bad. His methods a little cruel, his heart a little too cautious. Where's village chief? Qin Mu asked. As well as Grandpa Apothecary and Grandpa Mute, did they reach this place? Blind shook his head. My eyesight is good and I saw traces of Apothecary and village chief, but I didn't see Mute. The other people nodded silently. Granny C said. Apothecary and village chief should have faced no problem since they are together. There's also Patriarch and Elder of Discipline with them. However, we haven't seen Mute and this fellow never says a word. Whatever he plans to do, he won't share it with us. If he's alone, I reckon he'd find it hard to hold on. Muir, this place is so dangerous yet you still had to find your way here. You've had it hard. Qin Mu instantly got angry. All of you wandered off instead of coming back home for New Year's. If you got lost, what could I do but come and find you? Devil King, you shall lead the way. And you all stop wandering off. NN. The bunch of elderly nodded in a flurry. Dutian Devil King raised his head up high as he brought the old, weak, sick, and disabled elders of disabled elderly village forward. There are many able-bodied people in the village, so why is it called disabled elderly village? He thought to himself. Disabled elderly village today no longer fit its name. It even had young people like Granny C and Qin Mu in the village, so the word elderly itself owed some discussion. Old Ma, Butcher, and Cripple were already able-bodied. While Granny C might still be disabled in her heart, her body was fine. The only ones who were still missing parts of their body were blind, apothecary, village chief, mute, and deaf. However, Dutian Devil King didn't know that to the people of disabled elderly village, the disability of the body was not a disability. Their true disabilities lay in their hearts. Village chief was exhausted from not being able to fulfill his responsibility, which left him disheartened. Even if he was able-bodied, he still wouldn't walk out of great ruins. Apothecary had sliced his face off due to the pressure caused by the debts of relationships. Even if he regained the looks of his golden age, he still wouldn't dare to go out and face people. The reason why Blind was down was not because he had turned blind. And even though Old Ma had regained both his hands, he still couldn't pull himself together after the death of his wife and child. He was still unable to forgive himself. Granny C's heart devil, Cripple's past, Deaf's homeland, Mute's mysterious past, and the reason Butcher raised his knives at heaven were all shackles that restrained them. The disability in their heart was their true disability. They had sunk into a sorrowful past and were unable to break free of it. This was the reason behind disabled elderly village. If it was not because the child they had raised ran out, the people of disabled elderly village would have stayed quietly in the village and awaited their deaths, digging a pit to bury themselves. Qin Mu's arrival had gradually livened their hearts, but even he couldn't make them walk out of the past that had left them disabled. The true disability is when both the body and the heart are disabled. Because of this, these people could only rely on themselves to walk out. Dutian Devil King was truly the Devil King of another world. He knew so much that even Blind was endlessly impressed by his knowledge and concrete details. Dutian Devil King had completely convinced him with his attainments in algebra. They came to the border of the forest, which was near the end. There were only 2 more miles or so, but Dutian Devil King had to spend half a day just to cross these 2 miles. "It's New Year's Eve," Granny C suddenly said. Old Ma shook his head. "It's not considered New Year's until all the people of the village are present." Butcher's voice was loud like a bell. "We must find village chief, mute, and apothecary, see their bodies. Even if they're dead, we'll drag them back for New Year's." There was no more path in front of them, just the crumbling carefree village. There was no more land here at the end of the forest but a clean cross-section. Standing at the edge of the cliff, Qin Mu looked down and saw another forest. He couldn't help being stunned. "Another forest?" he said in astonishment. "This forest grows on the cliff, so how are the trees perpendicular to the ground?" Dutian Devil King jumped off the cliff and gave a thump as he stood steadily on the side. His body was perpendicular to Qin Mu's as he walked to and fro. "The seal here is much more complicated than what I thought. It's formed by a cube which seals Carefree Village within it, controlling the electromagnetic force of this place. You guys will know when you walk over here to take a look." Qin Mu stretched out his leg carefully and suddenly felt an attraction force below his feet. Placing his feet down and lifting up the other leg, he realized that he was standing on the cliffside without any discomfort. Not only that, from where he stood, it seemed like was standing at the edge of the cliff while Granny C, Old Ma, and the rest were standing on the cliffside. Only he and Dutian Devil King were standing on flat ground. He looked around and was slightly shook. He saw that the opposite side also had a forest that was perpendicular to the ground. Other than that, the sky in the other directions also had forests. This kind of situation was like pieces of land wrapping around Carefree Village to form an enormous hollow ball. However, looking from the geography, it didn't seem like a simple hollow ball. It seemed to be pieced together by thousands of cubes of different heights, while at the center of it was Carefree Village. Every cube was 1,000 miles of forest that was folded up, and every side of the cube was the obverse side. This kind of divine art was beyond what he could imagine. Even an existence like Imperial Preceptor wouldn't have been able to imagine that such a divine art could exist in this world, right? The electromagnetic force here has changed. Blind also walked over and felt the force of attraction. This great divine art is no small matter to cover the entire Carefree Village. I'm afraid the only exit is the place from which we came. Countless seals just to prevent the people of Carefree Village from walking out. Granny C also walked over and raised her head to look at the debris of Carefree Village floating silently. They were still quite a distance away from it, and she said, "Village Chief and Patriarch possess remarkable abilities, so they should have gone in there, right?" Dutian Devil King raised his head and walked back onto the path they had come from before shaking his head. There are many restrictions in the sky, and it would be hard to avoid them if one was to fly over. I would need to calculate for some 30-50 years to find the safest path. If my true body was here, I could do it faster, but it would still take me 1 or 2 years. The god that left behind this seal is too strong, not something that you guys can handle. If anyone tried to fly into Carefree Village, they are most likely dead," he muttered. "The entire Great Ruins is a cursed land, with a peculiar rule that shrouds it. It's really hard to live in a world like this, so Cult Master Qin, even if you invite me into this world, I won't come back again. This world is too twisted," Blind muttered. "Village Chief is definitely alive. That old fellow doesn't take anything seriously, but once he does take something seriously, he will definitely be able to do it. Wait a minute. Don't you guys think that the shape of Carefree Village looks like a ship?" Everyone raised their head to look. Carefree Village was extremely huge, but even though it was in ruins, they could still see the glorious and magnificent sight it was in the olden days. There was also a sun that was about to sink into the darkness hanging farther away. However, if they pieced these shattered peaks, huge pieces of machinery, and the destroyed city together, its shape did indeed look like a huge and grand ship that was inconceivable. In comparison, the sun and the moon ships were nothing. Carefree Village is a ship? Qin Mu felt it was too much for his brain to handle. Even though the sun in the sky was a man-made one, it was extremely huge. If the city and mountains were combined, it would become even larger and surpass the size of the sun and the moon ship by 1,000 times. Could there be such a huge ship in this world? Great observation, Blind. Cripple's eyes lighted up, and his breaths became rapid as he pointed towards the sun that was half consumed by darkness. This sun should be the source of energy for this ship. It's a huge pill furnace. An unimaginably huge pill furnace. Granny C rolled her eyes at him. You can't carry it home. Dutian Devil King was also slightly shaken and said under his breath, such a huge pill furnace, what was this ship used for? Why is it sealed here? Could it be? Ha ha ha, I must be thinking too much. He laughed coarsely and didn't speak another word. Old Ma said, ships are used for ferrying passengers. They bring people to their destination, so this ship must have its own destination as well. Def, who had been silent, suddenly said, isn't it Carefree Village? Carefree Village is carefree, so why does it need a destination? With a destination, it won't be Carefree Village anymore. If it's not Carefree Village, what's its destination? Everyone looked at one another in the eyes and said in unison, the true Carefree Village. Chinmu stared blankly. The guess of these elders from his village left him even more at a loss. True Carefree Village, wasn't this place Carefree Village? However, what Old Ma and the rest said made sense. Since such a huge ship was constructed, it definitely had its destination, and the destination of this ship might really be the true Carefree Village. Yet this ship was discovered by the enemy, which had destroyed and sealed it. The people who were lucky enough to survive tried to escape from the seal but ended up suffering disastrous casualties. They had then spent countless years to pave a way out. The devils in the darkness were also searching for Carefree Village, and even thought that this was Carefree Village. However, this was only a ship that was headed to Carefree Village. If Carefree Village is not here, where's the true Carefree Village? Chinmu was at a loss. Where exactly is my hometown? Did any of my clansmen survive? His mind was in a mess, and at this moment, a silver light flashed across the sky. A silver boat flew out from the city, and on that silver boat stood Mute, who was holding onto a wooden chest. On the boat were also two white-haired elders, a faceless man and a youth. Mute controlled the silver boat, flying nimbly in the air to avoid the divine restrictions in the sky. Dutian Devil King was dumbfounded. The path that the silver boat was taking now was the safest path that he had to take dozens of years to calculate. This silver boat ferrying the people traveled back and forth among the divine restrictions. It was like a clever fish going in all directions to avoid all kinds of danger. After some time, the silver boat descended from the sky and landed in front of the group. Apothecary carried out village chief and walked down the boat while the young patriarch shook his head. Why do you have to carry him? He can clearly fly by himself. Apothecary was stunned and placed village chief upright on the ground with a smile. I'm already used to it. Chinmu and the rest immediately came forward, and Mute opened up the wooden chest. The silver boat melted and turned into silver pellets which went tinkling into the wooden chest. Mute closed the lid with skill and picked up the chest. When he saw everyone walking over, he revealed a grin and waved his hand. Ah! Everyone went forward and surrounded the newcomers, full of all kinds of questions for everyone, especially Mute. How did he know about the safe path that even the extremely knowledgeable Dutian Devil King required dozens of years to calculate? What exactly did they see when they went into the city in the sky? Was that place Carefree Village or not? Were there any survivors? Everyone was about to say something when village chief floated over and smiled at Chinmu. Muir, let me tell you a piece of good news. We have finally found your surname. Apothecary, hand the things to him. Apothecary poured out many things from his pouch. There was a waist tag, bronze mirrors, a horizontally inscribed board, an imprint, a jade pendant, and some clothes. On all of these items there was one word, Chin. Your surname is Chin. Apothecary smiled. There are many such items in that city, and village chief asked me to gather a few. Look at the handwriting on them. Doesn't it look like the handwriting on your jade pendant? Chinmu's mind was blown. He looked back at the small village he had passed by on the way here. A flicker of hope reignited in his heart. Village chief seemed to know what he was thinking and said, that place may or may not be where you were born, and that family may or may not be your parents. There is still a chance that your parents are alive.